Chapter 1. The entry that shouldn't exist if you want to see a man regret a decision that has already left his mouth. Watch Inspector Cramer agree to climb the stoop of Nero Wolfe's brownstone on a cold afternoon in early January. New York had put on its winter face, the one that looks like it was carved out of soot and wind. The street in front of the house on West 35th was wet with melted slush that had nowhere to go, and taxis went by with a hiss like irritated snakes. Inside, the air was clean, warm, and expensive. That was not because Wolfe had installed a money filter in the furnace. It was because Theodore Horstman, Wolfe's chef, refused to let the world seep into our hall like a draft. I was at my desk in the office, doing what I do when there is no client to entertain and no corpse to step around. That is, I was working. I had invoices in one hand and a pencil in the other, which is a pair that does not make a boy feel heroic. Fritz Brenner had just brought in a tray with coffee, hot enough to deserve respect, and a plate of something he called a small biscuit, but which had the mass of a paving stone and the morals of a temptress. Wolfe was upstairs with his orchids, as regular as the clocks in the Astor lobby, and I had the house to myself except for Fritz, Theodore, and the fact that the whole place always felt as if Wolfe's temper was seated somewhere nearby, waiting to be consulted. I considered ignoring it, because Wolfe dislikes interruption before noon and merely tolerates it after, but the bell was followed by a pounding that made it clear the caller had not attended the Wolfe School of Patience. When I opened the door, the winter tried to come in with the visitor. But Fritz was quick, and I was quicker. Inspector Cramer stood on the threshold with his shoulders hunched and his hat pulled down. The look on his face said he had been awake too long and fed too poorly. Behind him, Sergeant Pearlie Stebbins held a thick folder under his arm, as if he was afraid the paper might escape. Cramer grunted. "Is he in?" I said. "Good afternoon to you too. Inspector, he is in the house. Whether he is available depends on your manners and my mood." He pushed past me, not hard, just with the certainty of a man who had pushed through more doors than he had opened politely. Stebbins gave me a hopeful nod, which is what he does when he wants me to be nice to him in case he needs to borrow my nerve later. In the office, I offered them chairs. Cramer declined by remaining standing, which saved time and wasted comfort. Stebbins sat carefully, as if the chair had a temper. "Wolfe's upstairs," I said. "He has not yet concluded his morning occupation of being right about plants. If your trouble is urgent, I can summon him. If it is not, you can sit and admire the rug." Cramer's eyes went to the Persian rug, then to the bookcase, then to my desk, as if he expected a criminal to be hiding behind my adding machine. "This is urgent," he said, "but it does not involve a gun or a knife. You will like it." I liked the part where it did not involve a gun or a knife. I did not like the part where Cramer claimed to know what I would like. I rang the bell for Fritz and told him to ask Wolfe if he would receive the inspector. Fritz returned in less than a minute with Wolfe's response, which was a short word that would have sounded polite only if spoken by a rattlesnake. I went upstairs anyway. Wolfe's rule is that he dislikes being disturbed. My rule is that I dislike being blamed for failing to do what I was told to do. When I reached the plant rooms on the top floor, the heat hit me in the face like a wet towel, and the smell of damp bark and blossoms wrapped around my head. Wolfe was seated on his high-backed chair, like a judge in a tropical court, with his spectacles low on his nose and a small silver tool in his hand. He looked up as if I had insulted him. "Inspector Cramer is in the office," I said. "He claims it is urgent and that you will like it." That last is improbable. Wolfe's tone was flat. "Does it concern a homicide?" "It concerns a dead bookkeeper and a ledger entry that should not exist." That got his attention, which in Wolfe is a visible thing. His eyes shifted from me to a row of orchids, as if he was considering whether the flowers might have committed something. Then he set down the tool and rose, large and deliberate. "Very well," he said. "You have reminded me that the calendar has turned. The world has made its annual attempt at renewal and has already failed. I will receive him." On the way down, Wolfe moved like a man who resented every stare. It was not because he was incapable, It was because he considered physical effort an affront, like a wrong note in a concerto. When we entered the office, Cramer's face tightened, which in him is an expression somewhere between irritation and relief. He does not like Wolfe, but he likes unsolved problems less, and Wolfe is the only man he knows who can turn those into solved problems with nothing more than a chair and an attitude. Wolfe seated himself behind his desk, adjusting his bulk as carefully as a banker arranging a safe. I took my chair at the side, lit a cigarette, and made sure my notepad was ready. "Inspector," Wolfe said, "your presence suggests either desperation or a desire to disturb me. Select one." Cramer's lips pulled back slightly. "It's both. You can bill me later. A man is dead. The facts are strange. The family is screaming. The employer is sweating. And the only clue looks like a line of ink." Wolfe's eyes narrowed, which is what he does when the world offers him something he might respect. "Proceed." Cramer nodded at Stebbins. "Tell him." Stebbins opened the folder with care, as if Wolfe might bite him for mishandling it. "Name is Liam Crow, 38, bookkeeper. Employed by Barton Freight Services. He was found this morning in the back office. Dead, time of death. Is estimated between 11 last night and 2 this morning. Locked room. Poison," Stebbins said, and sounded pleased, like a boy who has brought home a science project that did not explode. "Something fast. The medical examiner thinks cyanide, but he wants more tests." Wolfe's lips tightened. "Poison is the refuge of the timid and the vain." "Continue." Cramer took over. "The back office is a separate room behind the main bookkeeping area. It has one door. That door was locked from the inside when a clerk came in this morning and couldn't get Crow to answer. They got the owner, Martin Barton. He had a key. They opened it. Crow was at his desk, slumped, dead. The window was latched, no way in or out except the door." Wolfe made a small sound that could have been agreement or indigestion, and the ledger entry. Cramer's expression shifted. This was the part he had come for. On Crow's desk was the year-end ledger big book. It had been stamped closed. The stamp reads, "Closed," and the date, the 2nd of January. The company locks their year at midnight, apparently then stamps the books as a ritual. Under the closure line, there was a fresh transaction written in neat. "As you please, dated the 1st of January at 11:58 p.m., 2 minutes before the year, end lock." I whistled softly, because I like it when trouble has manners. "A late entry." "A late entry that should not be there," Cramer said. Crow was the only one who handled the ledger. Barton claims it is a harmless adjustment, a correction to balance an account. He said that while his face was doing something a man's face should not do when the word harmless comes out. Wolfe's eyes lifted to mine. "Mr. Goodwin." "Different pen," I said. "Thicker ink, sharper strokes." Crow was a thin ink man. "I saw samples in the file Stebbins brought, and I saw a photograph of the page." Stebbins blinked. "How did you see it?" "I have eyes," I said. "They came with the package." Wolfe turned back to Cramer. "So the bookkeeper is dead in a locked room. There is an entry in a ledger that is anomalous, in placement and in instrument. The employer declares it harmless while trembling." "What is your question, Inspector? You do not come here merely to share your misery." Cramer's jaw set. "My question is, who killed him and why? And I don't want a lecture about how my men should have found it. We have been through that." Wolfe leaned back slightly, his fingers steepled. "You are asking me to investigate for the police." "I'm asking you to help," Cramer said. "Because this is going to be a nightmare. Locked room, no entry, no exit. The press will love it. Barton Freight has contracts with half the city. If this turns into a scandal, there will be people calling my commissioner and making speeches about competence." Wolfe's eyes went to the window for a moment, as if considering whether he could have the winter removed. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "do we have any engagements that would interfere with the pursuit of an interesting puzzle involving bookkeeping and homicide?" I grinned. "Only your orchids, and they will survive your attention span. Also, Theodore is planning roast duck for dinner." Wolfe's eyes softened a fraction at the mention of food. Then the question is not interference. It is remuneration. Cramer snorted. You want money from the city. I want money from someone, Wolfe said. The city does not pay private detectives to rescue it from embarrassment. Cramer looked at me. Talk to him, I said. We can talk to him. He can also talk to Martin Barton, or to whoever has the best reason to want that ledger entry to exist and to remain undisputed. Wolfe nodded once. Exactly. This is not a charity. Inspector, you will notify Mr. Barton that I am prepared to accept employment in this matter, and that my fee will be commensurate with the complexity and urgency. Alternatively, you may persuade him that my involvement is in his interest, which it is assuming he prefers solvency to notoriety. Cramer's face reddened. I can't order him to hire you. No, Wolfe agreed. You can only remind him of what will happen if he does not. Stebbins cleared his throat, wanting to be useful. We already questioned him. He's rattled. He said he didn't know why Crow would make that entry so late. He said Crow was meticulous. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Meticulous men do not make casual late entries in closed books, nor do they poison themselves in locked rooms unless they are very thorough. Mr. Goodwin, take down the name and address of the firm. Inspector, you will also provide me the names of all persons with access to that back office, all persons present in the building after 6 p.m. on January 1st, and a description of the system by which the books are stamped and closed. Cramer scowled, but he had come to be ordered around, so he endured it. You'll get it. Wolfe's hand moved slightly, dismissing him. Then we are done for the moment. Cramer did not move. He looked at Wolfe with the stubbornness of a man who knows he is about to be dissatisfied. One more thing, he said. The entry itself. It's not just an adjustment, it's a transfer, a debit from a company account that shouldn't be touched, and a credit to a vendor I never heard of. The name is written clear. Harbor Light Consulting. Amount is 15,000. I felt my eyebrows rise. 15,000 is not a number that drifts. It is a number that walks. Wolfe's eyes did not widen, because Wolfe does not give the world that satisfaction. But the air in the room changed. It is what happens when a simple puzzle becomes a serious one. Harbor Light Consulting, Wolfe repeated. And the date and time are specified. January 1st, Cramer said. 11:58 p.m. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Numbers do not drift without help. Cramer's lips flattened. That's what I thought you'd say. Wolfe looked at me. Mr. Goodwin, we will go to Barton Freight Services at once. You will bring your notebook, your eyes, and your skepticism. Also, bring gloves. I do not care to touch the artifacts of commerce with bare hands. I stood, already feeling the day improve. Yes, sir. Should I bring a pen that writes in thick ink or thin ink? Wolfe's eyes flicked toward me. Bring both. It is always useful to have choices. Cramer exhaled like a man who has handed a hot pan to someone else. I'll meet you there. Stebbins will take you. Wolfe frowned. I do not travel in police vehicles. Cramer barked a short laugh. Then take a taxi, I've got work to do. He turned to go, and Stebbins followed, still carrying his folder like it contained a live animal at the door. Cramer paused and looked back. Crow's wife is in bad shape, he said. So are the people at the company. The owner is scared, Wolfe. Either he's guilty or someone has him by the throat. Wolfe's voice was calm. Fear is not proof, but it is often a clue. After they left, the house settled again, as if it had been holding its breath. I looked at Wolfe. He was motionless behind his desk, his face thoughtful, his eyes lowered as if he was reading an invisible page. You're interested, I said. I am offended, Wolfe replied. A closed book has been violated. A man has been killed to protect an entry of ink. This is a perversion of order. I do not like disorder, Mr. Goodwin. Neither do I said. But I tolerate it because it pays. Wolfe's gaze lifted. Bring my overcoat. I went into the hall, snagged Wolfe's coat from the rack, and helped him into it. He did not thank me. He never thanks me for performing tasks that keep him from moving. That is part of the arrangement. As we stepped out into the cold, The city hit us again with noise and dampness, and a gust of wind tried to turn my hat into a kite. Wolfe glowered at the street as if it had chosen to exist, just to inconvenience him. We got into a taxi. The driver eyed Wolfe in the mirror, with the look people give a man who appears to have swallowed a sofa. I gave him an address from Stebbins' file, and the cab lurched forward. On the way downtown, I reviewed what we had and what we did not. Dead bookkeeper, locked back office, poison, a ledger stamped closed, but with a late entry beneath the closure line, different pen. $15,000. A vendor name that sounded like it came from a cheap brochure, an owner who shook when he claimed it was harmless. I liked it. It had the smell of a clean crime with dirty motives. Wolfe sat beside me, silent, his hands folded over his stomach, his eyes half closed to the world. He probably looked as if he was resting. I knew better. Wolfe's mind does not rest when it has a puzzle. It sharpens. We arrived at Barton Freight Services, a brick building that had managed to look both solid and anxious. Trucks were parked along the curb, their sides streaked with winter grime, and men in work coats moved with purpose that had a brittle edge. The entrance smelled of oil, paper, and the kind of coffee that has been reheated too many times. A receptionist looked up as we entered and swallowed. She knew Wolfe's name in New York. A man can become a legend without ever leaving his chair, provided enough people have been forced to watch him solve their problems. "Mr. Wolfe," she said, voice thin, "Mr. Barton is expecting you." "Of course," Wolfe said. "He has little choice." She led us down a corridor to a suite of offices. The sound changed as we walked, from the rumble of freight business to the hush of accounting. That hush felt wrong. It was the quiet of people who are afraid to make noise because they might hear something answer. At the end of the corridor, a door stood closed with a brass plaque, "Martin Barton, owner," before we entered. I saw another door to the right, plain and unmarked, with a fresh set of scratches near the lock. Not forced entry scratches, more like the impatient marks of a key that had been used too quickly. I made a mental note. Wolfe did too, without looking. His nostrils flared slightly, which is his version of taking in a scene. The receptionist knocked and opened the door. We stepped into Barton's office. Martin Barton rose behind his desk. He was in his 50s, broad, shouldered, clean, shaven, dressed in a suit that tried hard to be confident and failed. His hands were large, and one of them trembled as he extended it. "Mr. Wolfe," he said. "Mr. Goodwin, thank you for coming." Wolfe did not take the hand. He rarely does, unless a client insists and Wolfe wants to demonstrate dominance by making him wait. Instead, Wolfe moved to a chair and sat, the chair creaking in protest. "Mr. Barton," Wolfe said, "your bookkeeper is dead and your ledger has been tampered with. You will answer our questions fully and truthfully, or you will endure the consequences of your reluctance. Begin by explaining why a transfer of $15,000 was entered at 11:58 p.m. on January 1st. Barton's face went paler. His eyes flicked toward the wall as if he expected the wall to suggest an excuse. "It was an adjustment," he said. His voice made an effort to be steady. "It failed. It was nothing criminal. Liam handled those things. He said it had to be done before the year closed." Wolfe's eyes were cold. "You have already used the word harmless. I advise you to remove it from your vocabulary. Harmless actions do not leave corpses." Barton swallowed. "I didn't kill him." "I did not say you did," Wolfe replied. "I said you are frightened. The reason for your fear is essential." I watched Barton's hands. They were on the desk now, palms down, as if he was trying to hold the wood in place. There was a framed photograph to his left, a woman and a teenage boy family. There was also a small brass stamp on the desk, face down like a guilty object that did not want to be seen. Wolfe's gaze went to it too. Barton followed Wolfe's eyes and flinched. "That's the closure stamp," he said quickly. "We stamp the ledger when the year is closed. Liam always did it. It's a tradition." "A foolish tradition," Wolfe said, "but a useful one. Who possessed that stamp at 11:58 p.m. on January 1st? Barton's mouth opened. No sound came. His eyes moved to mine, asking for mercy. He would have gotten it from a priest. He would not get it from me. Wolfe waited, immovable, and I had the feeling of a door slowly closing. Barton licked his lips. Liam had it, he said. He had it. And he had the ledger. He stayed late. He always stayed late at year end. Did you see him? Wolfe asked. No, Barton said. I left around 9. The clerks left. The building was quiet. Liam said he would lock up. Who else remained? Wolfe asked. Barton hesitated, then said, My operations manager, Denise Vale. She was finishing a shipping report. She left around 10:30, I think, and my nephew, Trevor Barton, was in and out. He works for me. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Your nephew, was he in the accounting area? He has access, Barton admitted. He's family. I wrote names, Denise Vale, Trevor Barton. I underline family because in my experience, it is often a polite synonym for problem. Wolfe's voice remained even. Mr. Barton, you will show us the back office where Mr. Crow was found. You will also provide the ledger and any instruments used to write in it. Finally, you will explain Harbour Light Consulting. At the mention of the vendor name, Barton's eyes closed for a fraction of a second, like a man bracing for impact. Then he said softly, I don't know anything about it. Wolfe stared at him. The stare was not loud, but it carried weight. Barton's voice rose a notch, a frightened man trying to make his lie sound sturdy. I told Liam to handle the adjustment. That's all. I don't know who Harbour Light is. Wolfe leaned forward slightly, and his tone sharpened. A bookkeeper does not invent a vendor name and transfer $15,000 without direction or leverage. If you are lying, you will regret it. If you are ignorant, you are incompetent. Choose. Barton's face flushed, then drained again. He opened his mouth, and I could see he was about to say something. Maybe the truth, maybe a better lie. The door behind us opened, and a woman stepped in without knocking. She was in her 30s, dark, haired, with a coat over her arm and eyes that were steady enough to suggest she had been steady on purpose for a long time. She glanced at Wolfe, then at me, then at Barton, and her jaw tightened. Martin, she said. The police are back. They want to talk to Trevor again. Barton made a sound that was not quite a groan. Wolfe's eyes fixed on her. You are Miss Vale. She looked surprised that he knew, then gave a short nod. Denise Vale Operations. Wolfe's voice was mild. Excellent. You will stay. I prefer to speak with those who do not tremble when they speak. Mr. Barton, take us to the back office. Barton rose, his chair scraping. His hand went toward the brass stamp as if to hide it. Then he stopped himself. Wolfe had already seen it, and Barton knew it. As Barton moved toward the door, Denise Vale's eyes met mine for a moment. There was a look there, quick and sharp, that said she was measuring me. I returned the favor. Wolfe stood, adjusting his coat with distaste for the environment. He spoke softly, more to himself than to us. A murder that does not want to disturb the paperwork, he said. That is a new kind of arrogance. We followed Barton into the corridor, toward the unmarked door with the scratches near the lock. And as we walked, I had a sudden, definite sense that the late entry in that ledger was not merely evidence of theft or fraud. It was a message. The kind of message someone writes when they believe the ink will protect them better than a locked door. Chapter 2, Year-End Rules and Year-End Pressure. New York in January has a way of making offices feel like chapels. The steam rises from grates. The sidewalks shine with slush, and men hurry as if the cold can audit them. At Barton Freight Services, they did not need winter to produce solemnity. They had their year-end close. We were back in the corridor outside the unmarked door, with Martin Barton guiding us as if he were escorting mourners. Denise Vale stayed close, coat over her arm like a shield. Wolfe moved with his usual reluctance for any journey not ending at his own desk. The lock had fresh scratches, the sort made by a nervous hand with a key. Barton added one more and opened the door. Inside, the back office looked harmless: desk, chair, cabinet, window with blinds. It was too small for drama, which is exactly why a man had been killed there. Under an evidence cover on the desk was the big ledger, its closure stamp visible even through plastic. There was also a faint brown smear at the desk edge and a shallow dent in the wall near the cabinet. I did not need Wolfe to tell me what had made that dent. Wolfe stood at the threshold and frowned. A room that small invites certainties. One is that the visitor was admitted. Barton swallowed. Liam would not open to a stranger. Then, Wolfe said, the visitor was not a stranger. Cramer arrived while Wolfe was still studying the room without touching it. He came in with the air of a man who has finally found the right nail for his hammer. Medical examiner updated, Cramer said. Wolfe turned his head. Yes. Not poison, Cramer told him. Blunt force. One strike to the back of the head. No struggle. Crow likely trusted whoever visited. Stebbins, hovering behind, looked miserable. There was an odor, sir. Cleaning solution, we thought. Wolfe dismissed him with a glance. Conjecture is permissible when it is labeled. Barton made a strangled sound. Denise Vale's face went tight, but she did not look away. The case had just lost its theatrical poison and gained something uglier, familiarity. Wolfe asked Barton, who would Mr. Crow admit without protest? Denise answered before Barton could choke on the question. Anyone in the office could knock and be let in. Kyle Denton, the accounting supervisor, Trevor Barton. Me, Mr. Barton himself. Liam was strict, but he wasn't paranoid. Strict, Wolfe repeated. We will examine that strictness. Barton led us out to the accounting area. Desks were arranged in tidy rows, and the people at them were trying to look as if dead bookkeepers were routine. They failed. When Wolfe entered, their eyes lifted and dropped again like nervous needles. A cardboard calendar on the wall still had a bright, cheerful picture of a beach for January, which struck me as a lie. At a desk near the window, a thin woman with rimless glasses was adding figures with the devotion of a monk copying scripture. She looked up as we passed, and I saw fatigue and resentment in her eyes, not grief. I tucked that away. A tall man in shirt sleeves approached, brisk and slightly offended by the idea that trouble could exist without his permission. Barton introduced him as Kyle Denton. Wolfe said, Mr. Denton, explain your year, end closing. Denton's mouth tightened. Then he spoke as if reciting rules he admired. We close at midnight, January 1st. No edits after, no exceptions. The physical ledger is stamped closed, and the accounting system is locked. After midnight, you need an override, and any override is logged. Liam insisted on that. He treated it like religion. Religion, I said. Do you have candles and a choir? Denton did not smile. We have auditors. And who keeps the stamp? Wolfe asked. This sacred instrument. Denton nodded toward Barton's office. It's usually in Mr. Barton's desk, but Liam took it on year-end nights. He liked being the one to close the year. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. A man who enjoys closing doors will object to seeing one opened. Denton continued, a little faster. Liam was rigid. He demanded receipts. He refused favors. He would not backdate, not even for executives. He made enemies, if you call irritation an enemy. Denise Vale said dryly, he made real enemies. Denton's eyes flashed at her. He made people mad because he was right. People kill you for being right, I said. It is a civic tradition. Wolfe's gaze stayed on Denton. Mr. Crow remained late on January 1st. Voluntarily, Denton insisted. He said he wanted to clean up December errors. He stayed late every year. He told me he did not want anyone hovering. He liked quiet. The thin woman with rimless glasses, the one at the window, made a small sound in her throat, like a snort she had tried to swallow. Wolfe's eyes flicked to her for a split second and returned to Denton. Cramer slapped a sheet of paper on the nearest desk. Security badge log says he badged in at 6:10 p.m. and never badged out. Denton shrugged too fast. He could have left with someone else. The door can be held. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. Then he left with someone. Name that person. Denton's jaw worked. I don't know. Wolfe let the silence sit on him. Silence is heavy when Wolfe supplies it, Cramer added. And the digital ledger entry was posted at 12:06 a.m., January 2nd, 6 minutes after the close. Override used user ID Crow. Denise Vale's eyes hardened. Liam could not have done that. Precisely, Wolfe said. He turned to Denton. Now tell me what the entry was. Denton said, vendor payment, 15,000 North Dock Logistics. That was a problem, because the name I had heard yesterday from Cramer was Harbour Light Consulting. I said it aloud. Denton blinked. In the system it is North Dock. I don't know what you think you saw, I said. I saw a photograph of the paper page. Thick ink, sharp strokes, and the vendor name looked like Harbour Light. If it is North Dock, then someone wanted the paper and the system to disagree. Denise Vale's voice sharpened. North Dock was flagged in December, split invoices. They broke one charge into two smaller ones. Liam froze them. Denton snapped. It was resolved. It was massaged, she replied. Liam did not sign off. Wolfe absorbed that, then spoke with the unhurried certainty that makes people wish he would shout instead. We have two ledgers, one on paper, one in a machine. Someone staged one entry to look barely in time and slipped the true entry in after. The paper is meant to excuse the digital record. The digital record is meant to move the money. Mr. Crow's name is meant to take the blame. Cramer grunted. And Crow is dead, so he can't complain. Wolfe nodded once. Yes, the murderer needed his obedience first, and his silence afterward. Barton's voice came thin. Why would anyone need to do that? Because the year-end rules you worship, Wolfe told him. Create cover. If it appears to be last year's business, it vanishes into last year's explanations. While Wolfe continued pressing Denton with questions that were quiet and therefore painful, I took Barton to a terminal. He tried to hover, which I discouraged by sitting him in a chair and giving him something useless to hold. The screen filled with columns and codes, and I felt briefly nostalgic for crimes that used fingerprints instead of passwords. North Dock's vendor file had a hold note in December, split invoices, payment frozen by Crow, release pending supervisor approval. There was also a small notation in a field called alternate payee name, and there it was, Harbour Light Consulting. I leaned back. Well, there's our missing poetry. Harbour Light is listed as an alternate name for North Dock. Denton across the room stiffened at the sound of the name. Denise Vale noticed and looked at him the way a hawk looks at movement in grass. I clicked open the audit log. The release had happened. I pointed at the screen. Hold release January 1st, 11:55 p.m., approved by user Cadenton. Denton half rose from his chair. That's not possible, Wolfe said, without raising his voice. Sit. It is possible. It is recorded. Denise Vale spoke. Level as a steel ruler. I saw your car in the lot at 10, Kyle. Denton's face flushed. I left at 7. No, Denise said. I saw it when I went down to check a shipment report. Denton swallowed and switched tactics. I came back for a file. Wolfe's tone was almost gentle. At 10 o'clock on New Year's Day, for a file. Denton's hands clenched. You don't understand the pressure here. End of year, contracts, penalties. If a payment doesn't go out, a vendor can freeze us. It can cost more than 15,000. Denise's eyes stayed on him. So you decided rules were flexible. Before Denton could answer, I took a minute to talk to the thin woman at the window. She had been listening hard while pretending to add numbers, and her pencil was tapping the desk in irritation. I said, Miss, I'm Archie Goodwin, you are? Her eyes narrowed. Marjorie Pell, accounts payable. I already talked to the police. Then you can talk to me without wasting time, I said. How strict was Liam Crow? Marjorie's mouth tightened. Strict. He'd send an invoice back for a missing coffee receipt. He told Kyle once that if Kyle wanted creative accounting, he should take up painting. Was he scared of anyone? I asked. Marjorie's gaze flicked toward Barton's office. He wasn't scared. That was the problem. He treated the year-end close like a wall. People begged to move something into December, to keep it off January books. He wouldn't. People like Trevor, I said. Marjorie snorted. Trevor thinks dates are suggestions. Who else asked favors? I said. Marjorie hesitated, then said, Kyle not like Trevor. Kyle tried to reason. Liam would just stare at him and say, rules, like he enjoyed it. That matched the way the stamp was treated. A tool, yes, but also a symbol of power. A man who could stamp closed could also refuse to reopen. Cramer returned with a young man in an expensive coat and a look that had never met a consequence it respected. He moved like someone who had always been allowed to move. Trevor Barton, Cramer said. He was heading out. Trevor jerked his arm. I was going to my girlfriend's. Wolfe regarded him without interest. Your uncle's bookkeeper is dead. An entry was posted after the close, using the dead man's credentials. You will tell us where you were between 11 and 1. At a party, Trevor said. Where? Wolfe asked. And with whom? Trevor shrugged. Downtown, people, Denise Vale said. Trevor asked Liam to backdate an expense report. Liam refused. Trevor got loud. Trevor glared. I said he was being ridiculous. Wolfe's eyes stayed on Trevor. Men who are refused sometimes retaliate, especially when they are accustomed to being indulged. Cramer said, We'll check your party. Trevor's confidence wavered for the first time. His gaze went to his uncle, and Barton looked away. That exchange told me more than Trevor's words. Wolfe stood, ending the officer's brief attempt at theatre. Inspector, you will verify Mr. Barton's whereabouts. Obtain any corridor or entrance camera record. Mr. Denton, you will remain available. Miss Vale, you will also remain available, and you will not warn anyone. Mr. Barton, you will not attempt to be helpful by forgetting details. Barton nodded, as if his neck had been borrowed. In the taxi back to West 35th Street, the city went by in grey panels, wet pavement, storefronts, men with collars up. Wolfe said nothing until we were halfway uptown. Then he spoke as if continuing a thought he had begun in the corridor. A single strike and no struggle, he said. Mr. Crow admitted his visitor. Authority or familiarity. Perhaps both. The year-end close made him powerful. He could deny men what they wanted. And the killer needed the entry, I said. And needed Liam quiet. Also needed Liam's credentials alive, long enough to be used. Wolfe's eyes remained on the taxi window, but his mind was already back in the brownstone, seated comfortably. Yes, the ledger is the hinge. The question is which door it opens, and for whom. Back home the warmth met us, and so did the faint, clean scent drifting down from Wolfe's orchids. He went upstairs briefly, because even homicide has to wait while he checks on blossoms, then came down to face reality with coffee. Theodore served luncheon. Not because Wolfe had earned it, but because Theodore believes in civilized habits. The food was excellent, which made me more tolerant of a world where men get killed for accounting. Afterward, Wolfe settled into his chair in the office. He looked as if he had never left it. I sat with my notebook open, and he regarded it with the patience of a man waiting for facts to line up. What have we? He asked. That is solid, I recited. Year-end closing is treated like religion there. No edits after midnight, no exceptions. Liam Crow enforced it, and was unpopular. Kyle Denton claims Liam stayed late voluntarily to clean up December errors. Security log shows Liam badged in at 6:10 and never badged out. The payment is to North Dock Logistics, flagged in December for split invoices, and Harbour Light Consulting is listed as an alternate name. The entry was posted at 12:06 a.m. January 2nd, after the books were closed, using Crow's credentials with an override. Wolfe nodded once. And the staged paper entry is meant to look barely timely, while the digital entry is the true act. Right, I said. Somebody wanted it to look proper, and also wanted the money to move. They needed last year stamped shut, and then they needed a crack in the seal. Wolfe's face tightened, pleased in the way he allows himself when a problem begins to show its bones. Then your assignment is clear. He looked at me and delivered it like a verdict. Find who needed the ledger closed and who needed it reopened. Chapter 3. The transaction that arrived too late. If there is one thing you can say for freight companies, it is that they generate paper the way bakeries generate crumbs. Barton Freight did not merely move crates and pallets across boroughs. It moved forms. The trick, as always, was figuring out which forms were honest and which were costumes. Wolfe stayed in the brownstone that morning, as he properly should. He had no intention of sitting in a drafty office, listening to people lie about invoice numbers. He had orchids to consider, coffee to drink, and a chair that fit him like a verdict. My job was to go out, get my shoes dirty, and bring back facts that could survive Wolfe's stare. Before I left, Theodore served breakfast in the dining room with the solemnity of a man placing offerings on an altar. Wolfe was in good form, meaning he was silent until the coffee reached him, and then became mildly contemptuous of the world. "You will go," he said. "And you will not return with a fistful of gossip. Bring paper, bring dates, bring names. The ledgers are the skeleton. The flesh will be on the invoices." "Yes, sir," I said. "Do you want me to bring a crate too, just to keep the freight theme?" He looked at me without blinking. "Bring only what is useful." That ruled out humor, but I brought it anyway. At Barton Freight the mood had worsened, which is a tough feat for a place that already had a dead bookkeeper and a nervous owner. People were speaking quietly, heads bent together, like office workers at a funeral who are not sure whether they are mourning the deceased or their own safety. Kyle Denton was not at his desk. Denise Vale was, and she looked as if she had slept in her chair and scowled through the night. She let me into the accounting area with a brisk nod. "I want North Dock paperwork," I told her. "Everything from December through the 1st. Her eyes narrowed. "You think the payment is hidden inside a legitimate charge?" "I think it is hidden inside something. Legitimate would be a pleasant surprise." Denise did not smile. She pointed toward the file room. "Marjorie Pell has the vendor files. She hates everyone equally, so you have a chance." Marjorie Pell greeted me with the same expression she had used yesterday, which suggested she would have preferred an additional dead body to another conversation. "I already told the police," she said. "I'm not the police," I said. "I have better hair and worse habits. I just want the North Dock file." She pulled a drawer open and slapped a thick folder onto the counter. "They're happy now." "I will be when the numbers behave," I said, and opened it. Invoices are supposed to be boring. They are supposed to march in a line, each one following the last like obedient schoolchildren. North Dock's invoices did not march. They stumbled. The numbers jumped. Invoice 18,427, 18,428, 18,429. Then a gap, then 18,441. That could mean missing invoices, except the totals did not act as if anything was missing. The monthly statement showed continuity, as though the gap had been smoothed over. The paper looked clean, too clean. The edges of a few pages had that faint, almost invisible roughness you get when something has been pulled and replaced in a hurry. Marjorie leaned over my shoulder, impatient. "North Dock changes formats a lot. They are sloppy." "Sloppy is one thing," I said. "This is a jump, like someone tore out pages and put in better ones." "Did Crow complain?" Marjorie's mouth tightened. "He complained about everything." "But yes, he complained about North Dock. He put them on hold in December, said split invoices, said missing signatures, said proof of delivery. Was not proof." That matched Denise's earlier remark. I flipped deeper into the file and found the hold notice, signed by Crow, with a note in his neat hand, "Verify proof, do not release." It was good, solid paper. The kind a man writes when he expects it to matter. Then I found something better. The month-end reconciliation copy, the one that would have been attached to the physical ledger. It was a scanned printout, stapled to the invoice packet, and it had faint shadows at the edge where a sticky note had once been attached. Not the note itself, just the shadow and a thin crescent of dried adhesive, like a ghost of caution. I ran my finger just above it, not touching, because I have learned that touching evidence makes policemen unhappy and makes Wolfe sarcastic. Marjorie watched me. Liam used sticky notes, she said. He'd slap them on everything. He wrote reminders, so he could say he reminded you. Do you remember what this one said? I asked. She hesitated. That was the first useful thing she had done. Something about North Dock. He was mad. He said it in front of Kyle once. What did he say? I pressed. Marjorie's eyes flicked toward the corridor, then back. He said, North Dock, verify proof, do not close. Those exact words, like he was writing it in the air. I nodded. And now the note is gone. It's not in the ledger copy, she said, and her voice held a small satisfaction, because she liked being right about unpleasant things. The stain is there, but the note isn't. I turned pages again. The January 1st invoice was on top, and it wore a neat little label, final reroute fee. The amount was large enough to be legitimate for a special freight nightmare, and also large enough to hide an extra stolen slice inside it, without making anyone blink. I took out my notebook and copied the amount, the invoice number, and the date. Marjorie asked. What is a reroute fee? It is the price you charge when you tell a customer you solved a problem you may have caused, I said. Denise Vale appeared in the doorway. North Dock did reroutes, she said. They handled some sensitive shipments for us, special handling. Her tone made those words sound like a locked drawer. Special handling, I repeated. Tell me what that means without using the word special or handling. Denise hesitated, then said, after Hawes deliveries. Sometimes to clients who did not want their competitors seeing what they were shipping, sometimes to locations that were not on the usual paperwork. It kept contracts, it kept us alive. And signatures, I said. Denise's jaw tightened. Not always. Sometimes the receiving party refused to sign. They wanted plausible denial. North Dock would drop, take a photo, call dispatch, and leave. Marjorie gave a sharp little laugh. Proof of delivery with no proof. Crow insisted on signatures, I said. He insisted on receipts. Denise corrected. He said if you cannot prove it, you cannot pay it. That was the kind of rule that makes enemies in an office where money moves like grease. I asked Denise, who at dispatch dealt with North Dock. She shrugged. Dispatch desk. Eddie Sperling mostly. He assigns drivers and logs calls. Liam did not like him. He liked few people, Marjorie muttered. I asked Denise, can I see dispatch? She nodded. I will take you. Keep your voice down. Dispatch was in a separate room nearer the loading bay. The air smelled of diesel and wet cardboard. A couple of men in work jackets were clustered around a board with roots pinned to it. At the center was a desk with 2 phones and a rack of pens. The pens were thick, barreled, the kind that write dark, decisive lines, and I remembered my own remark from yesterday about thick ink. Eddie Sperling was seated there. He was in his 40s, heavy in the shoulders, with a face that looked permanently annoyed by other people's needs. He looked up as Denise, and I approached, and his mouth tightened. Denise said, This is Archie Goodwin. He's working with Mr. Wolfe. He wants to ask about North Dock. Sperling snorted. North Dock again. Everyone's obsessed. I said, That is what happens when someone dies near paper. Tell me about special handling. Sperling leaned back. It's just after Hawes work. Premium. Some clients want stuff moved quiet. North Dock has drivers who do not ask questions. Do they get signatures? I asked. He rolled his eyes. Sometimes not, we note it. Who authorized payments without signatures? I asked. Sperling shrugged. Not me. Accounting. I held up the reroute fee invoice copy. This one final reroute fee, big enough to make a man swallow. What reroute? Sperling glanced at it, and his eyes flickered, quick and nervous. That was December 29th. A shipment had to be diverted because of weather. Weather, I said. In New York, that's like saying a cab had to reroute because there were cabs. He scowled. Look, I don't make the rules. I log calls. And you use these pens, I said, nodding at the rack. He glanced. Suspicious. Yes. So, I reached toward the rack and stopped, because touching dispatch pens without permission is like petting a police dog. Annie missing. Sperling jerked his chin. They get lost. People walk off with them. Do any have a chipped cap? I asked. His eyes narrowed. Why? Because I like details, I said. And because the ledger entry was written in thick ink. Denise stiffened, and Sperling's expression changed. He looked down at the rack as if seeing it for the first time. Then he cursed under his breath and grabbed one pen. He held it up reluctantly. The cap had a tiny chip on the edge, a neat little bite missing from the plastic. Happy, he said. I was. I did not show it. Where has that pen been? I asked. Sperling's face reddened. Here. On my desk. Always, I pressed. He hesitated. Most times. Denise cut in. Sharp. Eddie, don't be stupid. He glared at her. I didn't kill anyone, I said. Nobody asked you that yet. But you just answered. Which is a habit you should break. Denise said. If that pen got into accounting, I need to know. Sperling's jaw worked. Kyle borrows pens sometimes. He comes down here when his office runs out. He is cheap. Denise's eyes hardened. That was a new line connecting a supervisor to a dispatch pen, and I could almost hear Wolfe's chair creak in satisfaction all the way uptown. I said, so Denton borrowed dispatch pens. Did Liam Crow? Sperling snorted. Crow wouldn't come down here. He acted like the loading bay was contagious. That made sense. Bookkeepers often treat grease as immoral, I asked. North Dock deliveries after hours, who was around to admit them? Sperling shrugged. Security, or whoever was still here. We have a rear entrance. Sometimes trucks back up and unload quick. You don't need a signature for dropping a crate. Marjorie's voice from yesterday echoed in my head. Liam wrote reminders, so he could say he reminded you. Then someone removed one. I thanked Sperling without sincerity and went back with Denise toward accounting. As we walked, she said quietly, Eddie is a loudmouth but not a killer. Kyle, though Kyle is desperate right now. For what? I asked. Denise hesitated. For control, for keeping the company from looking bad, for keeping Mr. Barton from finding out certain things. Such as, I said. She looked at me, weighing how much truth she could afford, such as the fact that Kyle has been approving things he should not. He thinks if he fixes it on paper, it becomes fixed in reality. That was almost a confession, but it was not hers. So I returned to the front office area and found Cramer near Barton's doorway. His expression said he had been dealing with Trevor Barton again and had not enjoyed it. You look cheerful, I said. Cramer grunted. Got something? My men found Liam Crow's phone. In his pocket, I asked. In a trash bin behind the building, Cramer said. Wrapped in paper like it was garbage. Someone wanted it gone. We pulled the call log, and, I said, because the word was begging to be used. Last call at 11:41 p.m. January 1st, Cramer said. Outgoing to Kyle Denton. That was a clean fact. Clean facts are like gold. You can build a case out of them. I kept my face neutral because policemen dislike seeing private detectives enjoy themselves. So Crow called his supervisor 20 minutes before the ledger entry was dated. Cramer nodded. And 10 or 15 before he got hit. Time of death is still a window, but blunt force with no struggle. He likely opened the door, talked, got hit. And someone used his credentials at 12:06, I said, after he was dead or nearly. Cramer's eyes narrowed. We're checking how the credentials could be used. Password could be known, or written down, or forced out of him. Or, I said, someone logged in earlier and scheduled the post. Cramer scowled. We'll see. I went back to the accounting terminal and asked Denise for access to the audit schedule logs. She obliged, tight-lipped. I did not find a scheduled post. The override looked manual, that suggested someone had the password and sat down to use it, that someone would have needed access after midnight, when the building was mostly empty and the rules were supposedly sacred, and someone had arranged a paper entry at 11:58 to make the whole thing look like it had happened in time. Wolfe would call it psychological camouflage, and he would be right. People trust numbers more when they are close to a deadline. 11:58 p. Looks like an honest last-minute scramble. 12:06 a.m. Looks like a cheat. I gathered what I could: copies, notes, vendor files, a description of the chipped pen, and the fact of Crow's last call. Then I left Barton Freight with my hands full and my head busy. Back at West 35th Street, the house welcomed me like a well-run club. The warmth hit first, then the smell of cooking from the kitchen, then the faint floral note drifting down from the plant rooms. Wolfe was in the office, seated behind his desk with a cup of coffee placed exactly where he liked it. He looked as if he had been there for years and would remain there until the city apologized for itself. I handed him my notes. He did not reach for them immediately. He looked at my face instead. Wolfe can read an expression the way I read a menu. "You have something," he said. "I have several somethings," I told him. North Dock invoice numbers jump. Not missing charges, just missing pages. Looks like replacement. A clerk admits North Dock deliveries were special handling. After hours, often without signatures. Liam Crow wrote a sticky note on the reconciliation copy. North Dock verify proof do not close. The note is gone now, but the adhesive stain is still there. The new late entry is for a final reroute fee, big enough to bury a stolen amount in legitimate totals. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. Continue. The thick ink pen belongs to Dispatch, not accounting. Dispatch has a pen with a chipped cap. Kyle Denton borrows Dispatch pens. Dispatch chief claims Crow never used them. Also, Cramer's men recovered Crow's phone from a trash bin. Last call at 11:41 p.m. was to Kyle Denton. Wolfe's gaze went distant for a moment, his mind arranging the facts like books on a shelf. Then he spoke, softly, as if he did not want to startle the logic. "The entry is not merely false," he said. "It is crafted. 11:58 is not an accident. It is meant to soothe the reader. The reader is the auditor, and also the conscience of anyone who wants to believe." I said. "So someone wanted the paper to suggest it squeaked in under the wire, and wanted the system to actually move the money after midnight. The sticky note was a warning, and somebody removed it." Wolfe nodded. "Yes, a warning is inconvenient," I added. "Crow called Denton at 11:41, maybe to argue, maybe to warn, maybe because he discovered something." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Or because he was summoned. Mr. Goodwin, a man does not place a call to his supervisor at that hour, unless he is disturbed." I watched Wolfe's hands. They were folded, steady, but his eyes had sharpened. He liked the shape of it now, the way the crime had begun to show intent instead of chaos. "Crow was strict," I said. "He refused favors. He insisted on proof. He wrote reminders. Someone wanted North Dock paid anyway, and wanted the year closed, so it could be buried. Crow wrote, 'Do not close,' and someone erased it." Wolfe's voice turned firm. "The killer did not arrive after the ledger closed. He arrived because it was about to." Chapter 4. A closed ledger is a weapon when you work with Nero Wolfe long enough. You learn that his laziness is selective. He will not climb stairs without complaint, but he will climb logic without effort. He will not ride the subway under any provocation, but he will ride a contradiction all the way to its last stop. That morning, after I had given him the latest on North Dock, the Dispatch pen, and Crow's phone, Wolfe sat in his chair and stared at the wall behind my desk as if the plaster had offended him personally. "Mr. Goodwin," he said at last, "a ledger is not merely paper. It is authority. Identify the authority at midnight," I said, "meaning who could approve, who could unlock, who could override." "Precisely," he replied. "In every system there is a gate. In every gate there is a keeper. Find the keepers." The house around us was at its best. Theodore was in the kitchen producing civilized smells. Fritz moved with quiet competence, and somewhere upstairs Wolfe's orchids were enjoying their regulated warmth and light. The brownstone felt like an island, and the case like an unpleasant tide that wanted to come ashore. I finished my coffee and stood. "I will go interrogate your keepers." Wolfe lifted a hand. "Do not interrogate. Observe, distinguish capacity from conduct. A man will admit his powers sooner than his uses. That is Wolfe, always preferring the indirect route, provided it ends with a confession. At Barton Freight, Cramer met me in the lobby. He looked as if he had eaten a bad sandwich and blamed the city. "We got more on the access logs," he said. "I was coming for that," I told him. "Also, I want a list of who could do what after hours." He grunted. "You can have lists. They won't solve it." "I have a friend who believes lists are the first step toward truth," I said. "He also believes chairs are the first step toward happiness." Cramer's eyes narrowed. "Wolfe staying home again." "Of course," I said. "The murderer did not bring the crime to the brownstone, so Wolfe sees no reason to bring himself to the murderer." Cramer led me down the corridor. The building felt different today. Yesterday it was shaken. Today it was wary. Wary offices are the ones where people watch their words the way they watch their wallets. We found Denise Vale in her office. She had papers spread before her like a defensive wall. Her eyes met Cramer's with impatience and met mine with guarded relief. "I don't have time," she said. "You do," Cramer told her. "Make it," I said. "Denise, I need two things: who had authority at midnight to approve emergency fees, and who had system access to enter transactions after hours." Her jaw tightened. "Kyle Denton can approve vendor fees in emergencies. That is in his policy. He uses it too often." "Late," I prompted. "Late," she admitted. "He has approved fees after business hours more than once. He claims dispatch emergencies. Sometimes it is real. Sometimes it is Kyle being Kyle." "And system access?" I asked. Denise exhaled. "Mason Klein, finance supervisor. He has the higher-level system access. If the ledger needs an override, he can enter it," Cramer said. "Both claim they were home by 10. Denise snorted, a small, sharp sound. "They both claim many things," I asked. "Where are they?" "In conference room 2, Cramer said, waiting to be annoyed. That suited me fine. I like my suspects pre-annoyed. Conference room 2 had a long table, a pitcher of water, and 2 men sitting apart as if proximity might infect them. Kyle Denton looked rumpled, with the forced calm of a man who knows he is being watched. Mason Klein looked neater, with the rigid calm of a man who believes neatness is a defense. Klein was in his early 40s, lean, with careful hair and careful hands. He wore a watch that looked expensive but not showy, which told me he cared what people thought without wanting them to say it out loud. Cramer introduced me with a grunt. Denton said, "We already answered questions." I said, "Then you can answer them again without improvising. It will be a good exercise." Wolfe's instructions ran in my head like a set of rails: capacity first. Then conduct. I turned to Denton. "Kyle, you have operational authority to approve vendor fees in emergencies." He nodded quickly. "Yes, that is correct." "Define emergency," I said. He hesitated. "A situation where a shipment is at risk, a client is at risk, and immediate action is needed, like a reroute fee," I said. He pressed his lips together. "Yes, do you approve fees after hours?" I asked. He shrugged. "Sometimes freight does not stop at 5. "Do you approve them near midnight on New Year's Day?" I asked. His eyes flicked toward Klein and back. "Number." I turned to Klein. "Mason, you have system access to enter transactions after hours." Klein's voice was smooth. "I have access. Yes, I am finance supervisor. If a legitimate transaction must be entered outside the normal schedule, I can do it." "Outside the normal schedule meaning after the books are closed," I said. He gave a small nod. "With proper logging." "Which is supposed to deter abuse," I said. "It does," Klein replied. "A fraction too fast." Denton's shoulders stiffened. "I was," Klein said. "I was as well." Cramer slapped 2 printed sheets on the table. "Kicard logs say otherwise. Both your cards entered the building at 11:20 p.m. That is a good moment in any interrogation, the moment when a lie collides with a piece of paper." Denton's face flushed. Klein's expression did not change much, but his eyes tightened, like a man pulling a belt a notch tighter. Denton spoke first. That's impossible. Cramer's voice was flat. It's recorded. Klein's tone stayed controlled. I may have stopped by briefly. I left something. It is possible the time is off, I said. Both your cards off the same way at the same time. Denton swallowed. I came back for a file, I said. Kyle, you already used that line yesterday. It is wearing thin, Klein said. This is ridiculous. We came in separately. We have responsibilities. Cramer's eyes were hard. Responsibilities that bring you both in at 11:20 on a night your bookkeeper ends up dead, and your system posts a transaction at 12:06. Klein's jaw worked. The transaction used Crow's user ID. That is a detail designed to comfort you, I said. It does not. Denton's hands clenched. You think we killed Liam? Liam was difficult, but he was not worth that. I leaned back slightly and watched him. Men do not always kill over worth. Sometimes they kill over timing. Klein's eyes snapped to me. What does that mean? It means, I said, that a closed ledger is a weapon. If it is closed, it cannot be questioned without making noise. If it is about to close, a man who enforces the rules becomes dangerous. Denton's mouth opened, then closed again. Klein's gaze dropped to the table, as if the wood grain might offer a better explanation. Cramer said, We also pulled the corridor camera record. That got their attention. Cameras have a way of making liars feel unclothed. Cramer continued. The corridor camera outside the accounting area restarted at 11:17 p.m. It missed 12 minutes. Denton said quickly, Camera's glitch. Cramer's tone did not change. They can. This one restarted once in 6 months, and it did so exactly 3 minutes before both your keycards were used. Klein's voice stayed cool. If the camera was down, that is security's issue. It is everyone's issue, I said. Especially if you wanted a gap. Denton's eyes darted. Are you accusing us of tampering? I am accusing someone of loving gaps, I said. 12 minutes is exactly the kind criminals love. It is long enough to enter, do something, and leave, and short enough to be called an accident. You two are not going anywhere. Klein rose too, but stopped when Cramer's stare reminded him the room did not belong to him. I said, I want to see the camera system, and I want to see the ledger itself again. Denise Vale appeared in the doorway, summoned by the raised voices. She looked at Denton, then Klein, then Cramer, and her eyes hardened. Take him to the system, she said to me. I will find the ledger. She meant it. Denise was the sort of woman who treats a crisis as a checklist. The security office was a cramped room with monitors, and a tired man named Frank Heller, who looked as if he had been blamed for everything that ever went wrong in the building. He tried to defend himself before I accused him. We didn't touch it, he said. The camera rebooted on its own. It happens. Not often, I said. Heller wiped his hands on his pants. It is an older unit. I leaned in and looked at the logs. The reboot was recorded. The timestamp was there, 11:17. No explanation. No note. Just a neat, silent drop. Cramer stood behind me. We'll have a tech look at it. You should, I said, because if someone wanted to enter unseen, they got a gift. Or they gave themselves one, Cramer replied. That was closer to Wolfe's thinking. Wolfe does not believe in gifts. He believes in arrangements. Denise returned with a clear evidence sleeve. Inside was the physical ledger page, with the closure stamp and the notorious late entry. Even under plastic, I could see the stamped ink. It looked real. The stamp impression was firm, the lettering consistent, but there was a slight smudge at one edge. Not a blur, just a drag, like a fingertip had brushed it, except it did not look like a bare fingertip. It looked like something smooth had pressed and shifted. I stared at it a moment longer than I meant to. Denise watched me. What? I said. The closure stamp is genuine. The ink is smudged slightly. So, she said, impatient. Someone stamped it crooked. No, I said. Someone pressed it, And then something moved, like a glove. A gloved hand will smudge ink in a certain way, smooth, not ridged. Denise's eyes narrowed. Why would anyone wear gloves to stamp a ledger? To avoid leaving prints, I said. Or because they were already wearing gloves for something else. Cramer's jaw tightened. Like hitting a man. Or handling his phone, I said. Remembering the trash bin, Denise said. Liam always stamped it barehanded. He liked to show off. He would hold up the stamp afterward like a trophy. That image fit the man I had heard described. Proud of rules, proud of closure, I said. Then whoever stamped it this time was not Liam, or was Liam under unusual circumstances? Cramer grunted. The entry is in thick ink, dispatch pen. Denise nodded. Eddie Sperling's pen rack. He told me Kyle borrows them. I looked at the ledger again, and the cap chip detail rose in my mind like a small flag. The chipped cap, I said. Do you have the pen? Denise shook her head. Eddie will not give it up. He will if Cramer asks, I said. Cramer said, I will. I called Wolfe from the lobby before I left, because Wolfe prefers to receive facts in batches like a gourmet who will not tolerate small bites. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm and mildly irritated, which is his neutral. Ear port, he said. I gave it to him. Authority at midnight. Kyle Denton has operational authority to approve vendor fees in emergencies, and he uses it late. Mason Kine has system access for after-hours transactions. Both claim they were home by 10. Their keycards show building entry at 11:20. Corridor camera restarted at 11:17 and missed 12 minutes. The closure stamp is genuine, but ink is smudged, like it was pressed by a gloved hand. That suggests the stamper was not Crow, or he was coerced. There was a pause. Wolfe does not pause for drama. He pauses because his mind is doing arithmetic. Then he said, the camera gap is not an accident. Continue, I said. Also, I am increasingly convinced the late entry was part of larger fraud. Move money into North Dock, then extract it through refunds or shell accounts. The reroute fee is a perfect cover. Crow's strictness made him the only person who would stop it at the last moment, and he was about to stop it. His sticky note said, do not close. Wolfe's voice sharpened slightly. Yes, the closing becomes the moment of vulnerability. The ledger is the boundary. The killer chose that boundary. I will bring you copies and details, I said. Do so, Wolfe replied. Then we will summon the participants and observe their discomfort in my office. Any further errands, I asked. Yes, Wolfe said. Determine whether Mr. Denton and Mr. Klein acted together or merely arrived together. A coincidence at 11:20 is unlikely. Also, ascertain who else entered the building during the camera gap. I will, I said. But you know, I will need cooperation. You will obtain it, Wolfe said. Use charm, use threat, use whatever is necessary short of violence. Violence is inefficient. I returned to the conference room to collect one more impression. Denton and Klein were still there, watched by a uniformed man with the bored stance of someone guarding a bank deposit. Denton looked angry. Klein looked offended. Neither looked innocent. I said to Denton, Kyle, did Crow call you at 11:41? His face twitched. Yes. What did he say? I asked. He said he had concerns. Denton snapped. He always had concerns. I told him we would talk Monday. Monday, I repeated, after the year, end close, after the ledger was safely stamped. Denton's eyes flared. You're twisting. I am straightening, I said. Did you come in at 11:20? He hesitated. To check that the system close went through. We had issues last year. That sounded plausible and also convenient. I turned to Klein. Mason, did you come in at 11:20? He met my eyes. Yes, why? I asked. He held my gaze, then said, because Kyle called me and said there was an emergency vendor situation. A shipment reroute, a fee that needed posting. So you came in to post it, I said. I came in to evaluate, Klein replied, and I left. Before midnight, I asked. Yes, he said. Then how did the entry post at 12:06? I asked. His mouth tightened. I did not post it, I said. Did Kyle? Klein's eyes flicked toward Denton and away. I cannot speak for Kyle's actions. That was a careful answer, and careful answers are often masks. I left them there, stewing, and took my paperwork and notes back to the brownstone. West 35th Street looked the same, but inside the house, everything felt more precise, as if Wolfe's presence had tightened the air. The office was ready for war in its polite way. Wolfe was at his desk, eyes on his own notes, coffee beside him. The lamp made a clean circle of light, and beyond it the room held its dark, comfortable seriousness. I handed him the evidence sleeve photograph copies and my written summary. Wolfe studied the closure stamp page for a long moment. The stamp is genuine, he said finally. It is not forged. It was applied, however, with caution, a gloved hand, as you observed. That indicates the stamper anticipated scrutiny, I said. And maybe anticipated fingerprints. Wolfe nodded. Yes, the closing was performed as a ritual, but also as a tactic. He looked up at me, Mr. Goodwin. Consider what this implies. They needed the ledger closed. Why? To bury the charge in last year, I said. To pass audit. To say it was December business. And, Wolfe added, to force Mr. Crow into a position where he must either comply or obstruct. His strictness made him predictable. He would object, he would document, he would refuse. At the last moment, he would stop them, I said. So they removed his sticky note, and they removed him. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Not merely removed, silenced decisively. I told him about the keycards, the camera gap, and the way Klein claimed Denton called him. Wolfe listened without interrupting, which is how you know he is pleased. When I finished, Wolfe sat back and closed his eyes for a moment, not to rest but to organize. Then he opened them and spoke the line as if it had been waiting in his mouth since the case began. They closed the ledger, he said. To close Liam's mouth. Chapter 5. Numbers don't drift without help. If you want to measure how badly a man wants help from Nero Wolfe, you do not ask him. You watch how quickly he agrees to fetch documents that belong to somebody else. Inspector Cramer arrived at the brownstone on West 35th Street just after noon, and the fact that he arrived at all was a confession. He hates Wolfe's chair as much as Wolfe loves it. He hates our rugs, our quiet, our coffee, and the way Wolfe can stay seated while other men spend their days sweating through paperwork. Yet there he was, hat in hand, shoulders rigid, as if he had been told to stand in front of a judge who did not recognize his badge. I let him in and took his coat, partly from politeness, and partly because if you let Cramer keep his coat, he looks more ready to leave. If he looks ready to leave, Wolfe will notice and get annoyed. Wolfe dislikes seeing a man attempt to escape before the entertainment is over. In the office, Wolfe sat behind his desk, facing the world like a fortress with an opinion. I took my chair and lit a cigarette, because watching Cramer in Wolfe's office is improved by smoke. Cramer did not sit. He never sits unless Wolfe forces him, and Wolfe rarely forces him, because Wolfe enjoys the small discomfort. Wolfe began without greeting. Inspector, you have something. Cramer grunted. We have a dead bookkeeper and a money trail that's starting to smell like rot. You want the bank records, you said. Wolfe's eyes held his. I do not want them. I require them. The vendor, North Dock Logistics, received a payment. The question is whether North Dock is the thief or the conduit. Cramer's mouth tightened. We subpoenaed what we could. The bank gave us transfer summaries. Full detail takes longer. Wolfe looked mildly displeased, as if the bank had been late with soup. Summaries will suffice for now, provide them. Cramer opened a folder and slapped papers onto the corner of Wolfe's desk. Wolfe did not touch them immediately. He waited until Cramer's hand moved away, as if avoiding contamination. I took the papers because my hands are expected to do the dirty work, and scanned them. There were transfer dates, amounts, routing numbers, and a name that did not belong. The funds went from Barton Freight to North Dock Logistics, and from North Dock to a mailbox business in Queens with a name that sounded wholesome and was not. Then from the mailbox business to a personal account. The personal account belonged to a man named Raymond Klein. I looked up. Klein. Cramer nodded. We pulled it. Raymond Klein is Mason Klein's cousin. Different last name on the account is the same, and the address matches Mason's mother's place from an old record, their family. Wolfe's face did not change much, but the air changed anyway. Wolfe does not enjoy being right because he thinks he deserves it. He enjoys it because it shortens his path. Observe, Wolfe said softly, how numbers behave when helped. Cramer's jaw set. We don't have enough to charge Mason yet. It could be cousin using the same bank. It could be coincidence. Wolfe's gaze was contemptuous. Coincidence is the refuge of those who avoid thought. The money went to a mailbox business, then to a relative. That is not coincidence. That is concealment. I said, what is the mailbox business? Cramer flipped a page. Dockside mail and parcel, rents boxes. Also offers forwarding and business address services. North Dock's vendor file lists that address as their billing location. Convenient, I said. So Barton Freight pays North Dock. North Dock sends the money to a mailbox, and the mailbox sends it to a cousin. North Dock looks like a vendor, the mailbox looks like an office, and the cousin looks like a man who just got lucky. Wolfe's fingers tapped once on the desk. And Mr. Crow, who would have stopped it, is dead. Cramer leaned forward. We still need the murder. Fraud is one thing, homicide is another. Wolfe lifted his heavy eyebrows. You believe that those who steal will not kill. That is an agreeable belief and an unhelpful one. I looked at the transfer dates again. These were not one time. There are several transfers, smaller ones in December, then the big one at year-end. Cramer grunted. That's why I'm here. It's not just one entry, it's a pattern. Wolfe nodded. Then the late entry was a culmination. Mr. Crow discovered it was about to be sealed. He objected. They forced compliance or attempted to. Then they silenced him. Cramer straightened. You're building a story. I am building a structure, Wolfe corrected. The story will hang on it. He looked at me. Mr. Goodwin, you will confront Mr. Klein. Not interview. Confront, Wolfe repeated. He is educated, careful, and nervous. He will attempt explanation. Observe his language. Cramer snorted. You want him to confess to you? I want him to demonstrate his nature, Wolfe said. Confession is a bonus. Demonstration is a certainty. I stood. I'll go, Cramer said. Take Stebbins with you. I shook my head. If I take Stebbins, Mason will feel like he's talking to the police and he'll clamp up. If I go alone, he'll try to charm me or intimidate me. Either way, he'll talk, Wolfe added. Mr. Goodwin will go alone. You will remain here, Inspector, and you will answer my questions. I am not finished using you. Cramer's face tightened. He did not like being used, but he disliked being useless more, so he stayed. Before I left, Wolfe asked Cramer for one more thing. The corridor camera restart. Have you confirmed it was not routine? Cramer said. Tech says it's suspicious. Power was interrupted at the junction box, not by a random failure. Someone shut it down and brought it back. Wolfe's eyes gleamed a fraction. Excellent. Add that to the structure. I left them there. Wolfe seated and Cramer standing, both stubborn in their preferred positions. Outside, the city was grey and brisk. Taxis hissed over wet pavement. People moved with collars up and tempers held in because winter turns everyone into a small private complaint. I took a cab to Barton Freight. Mason Klein met me in the conference room. Alone this time, he looked as if he had decided that solitude was safer than Kyle Denton's company. His tie was straight, his hair was neat, his eyes were not. Mr. Goodwin, he said. I understand you're assisting Mr. Wolfe. I am, I said. Sit down. He sat. I did not. Standing gives you a better view of a man's posture when he starts lying. I laid one paper on the table, Not the whole bundle. You do not throw an entire deck at a man at once. You deal cards. This is a transfer, I said. From Barton Freight to North Dock, and then onward, it ends in a personal account belonging to Raymond Klein. Mason's eyes flicked to the paper, then back. Raymond is my cousin. I know, I said. Explain why money from North Dock ended up in his account. His mouth tightened. North Dock uses consolidation services. They have multiple lines. Sometimes they route payments through a clearing account. A clearing account owned by your cousin, I said. It's not owned by him, Mason said quickly, then paused. Isn't it? I asked. It's a business account, he said. For consulting, for vendor consolidation, it's complicated. I nodded as if impressed. Complicated is what men say when they want you to stop looking. His jaw worked. You don't understand vendor structures, try me, I said. Start with a mailbox business in Queens, Dockside Mail and Parcel. His eyes narrowed. North Dock uses that address because their warehouse moves. They don't want mail lost. Sure, I said. Then why does money go from North Dock to Dockside, then to your cousin? Mason's voice sharpened, then softened again. It's reimbursement. It's a rebate. First it was consolidation, I said. Now it's reimbursement. Now it's rebate. Keep going, and we will reach lottery winnings. His eyes flashed anger. But it was controlled. You're being provocative. I'm being accurate, I said. Explain it in one set of terms, and keep those terms. If the truth is stable, the words will be stable. Mason's hands moved on the table, fingers touching as if he needed something to hold. North Dock provides services beyond freight. They coordinate. Coordinate what? I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation was the first honest thing he had done. Coordinate, he repeated. Vendor relationships. I leaned down slightly so he could see my face better. Mason, liars change language the way they change entries, quickly and quietly. He stared at me. For a moment I thought he might lose control and say something real. Then his carefulness returned like a lid. This is not relevant to a murder, he said. It is relevant, I told him, because a man who was about to block this money, Flo, is dead, and because your keycard shows you came into this building at 11:20 on January 1st. His eyes widened a fraction. That must be wrong. Both your card and Kyle Denton's are wrong the same way, I said. That is impressive. He stood abruptly. I am not speaking without counsel. Of course, I said. That is what men say when their words stop helping them. He moved toward the door. I let him go. If you chase a man who has decided to stop talking, you get less than nothing. You get a complaint, as he left. I watched his shoulders. They were tense. He was nervous. Not just nervous about fraud. Nervous about something that could not be repaired with language. I took my notes and went to find Denise Vale. She was at her desk, staring at a shipping report, as if it had insulted her. Mason is lawyer shopping, I told her. She did not look surprised. He always thought he could out-talk trouble. Who cleans this suite at night? I asked. Her eyes flicked up. Cleaning crew comes through around 10:30, sometimes later if dispatch is active. I want the cleaner who worked January 1st, I said. Denise hesitated, then nodded. I'll call building services. 10 minutes later, a man in a grey uniform entered the office suite, cap in hand. He was in his 50s, with a tired face, and the cautious eyes of someone who has seen too much business and wants none of it. His name was Harold Pinsky. He smelled faintly of disinfectant and resignation. Cramer was there by then, having returned from an argument with someone upstairs, and he took over with his official voice. Mr. Pinsky, Cramer said, you were cleaning this floor near midnight January 1st. Pinsky swallowed. I was here, yes. Did you see anyone? Cramer asked. Pinsky hesitated. Denise said quietly, tell the truth. It's safer. Pinsky nodded slowly. I saw two men near the accounting doors. They were not loud. They were arguing in whispers. Cramer leaned forward. Describe them. One tall, Pinsky said. broad shoulders, the other shorter, thinner. The shorter one looked nervous, kept moving his hands. The tall one was angry. I heard one word. I think, close. My mind clicked. Denton was tall. Klein was shorter and nervous. That fit too neatly to ignore. Cramer asked. Time, Pinsky thought. Close to midnight, maybe 11:45. I was emptying the bins. I do not wear a watch. I remember because I wanted to go home. Did you see them enter the back office? I asked. Pinsky shook his head. Number they were in the corridor, then the lights flickered, and the camera above the door went dark for a bit. After that I did not see them again. Cramer's eyes hardened. Camera went dark. Pinsky nodded quickly. Yes, like it blinked. Then it came back. That matched the camera restart, at 11:17 and the gap. Pinsky's sense of time might be off, but his detail about the flicker was valuable. Cramer dismissed him with a nod, and Pinsky left as if escaping a bad dream. I went straight to the back office, the small room where Crow had died. Police tape had been removed now, but the air still felt wrong, like a room that had learned a secret and did not want to share it. Cramer let me in, which was his version of cooperation. He stood at the door, arms folded, watching to make sure I did not steal the desk. Crow's desk was bare except for a blotter. I lifted the blotter carefully, using the edge of a paper as a barrier, and found what I had suspected since Wolfe's mention of coercion. A faint indentation in the paper beneath, like the imprint of a signature pressed hard, not written comfortably. It was not readable, but it was there. A groove where a pen had been forced to trace or sign. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with January. I said to Cramer, "Somebody made him sign something here." Cramer peered. "Could be just writing." "No," I said. "This is pressure. This is a hand pushed down. Crow's hand or someone else's. He was made to put ink where they wanted it." Cramer's jaw tightened. "So they tried to get his approval, then killed him anyway. Or killed him because he refused after," I said, "or because he threatened to talk." On the way back to the brownstone, I called Wolfe. He answered promptly, as if he had been waiting beside the phone. "Mason Klein is slippery," I told him. He tried to explain the transfer as vendor consolidation, then shifted to reimbursement, then rebate. He changed terms mid-sentence. He refused to continue without counsel. Cleaner named Pinsky reports, seeing two men near midnight, arguing in whispers. One tall and angry, one shorter and nervous. Denton and Klein fit. Pinsky also noticed the corridor camera blink. And there is a faint indentation under Crow's blotter, like a signature was forced or traced. Wolfe's voice was calm, satisfied in an unpleasant way. Yes, they attempted to obtain a sign-off, a coercion to sanctify the theft. When sanctification failed, they resorted to elimination. I said, "You think Crow was made to sign off, then killed when he refused or threatened to expose it?" "I do," Wolfe replied. Mr. Crow's strictness made him an obstacle and also a necessity. They needed his compliance to legitimize the entry. They could not tolerate his resistance. "And the money trail points to Mason's family," I added. "Mailbox business to cousin." "Fraud," Wolfe said, "is now nearly certain. Murder remains to be placed precisely. We will force placement." I heard the slight shift in his voice, the one that means he has decided on a tactic. "What do you want me to do now?" I asked. "Return," Wolfe said. "We will set a trap." Back at the brownstone, the house was in its civilized rhythm. Theodore was preparing dinner with the concentration of a man conducting an orchestra. The aroma of roasting meat drifted faintly into the hall, rich and disciplined. Upstairs, Wolfe's orchids were receiving their scheduled attention, not because they cared about fraud, but because Wolfe did. When I entered the office, Wolfe was already seated, fingers steepled, eyes alert. Cramer was there again, still standing, still annoyed, and Stebbins hovered behind him with the loyal look of a man prepared to be ignored. Wolfe listened as I repeated my report in full. When I finished, he nodded once. "Good," he said. "Now we will compel reaction." Cramer scowled. Reaction from who? From the guilty, Wolfe replied. In a fraud of this sort, there is a fragile point. The perpetrators believe the ledger is their shield. We will crack the shield. Cramer's eyes narrowed. How? Wolfe's gaze settled on him. You will announce publicly enough to be heard by the relevant parties that Mr. Crow left a sealed copy of the year, end ledger with the district attorney. Cramer's mouth opened. That's a lie. Wolfe's tone remained mild. It is a trap. You are not required to enjoy it, only to perform it. Cramer's face reddened. You want me to lie in an official capacity? Wolfe's eyes were cold. You want me to solve your homicide? You will use the instruments available. You have used pressure, subpoenas, and surveillance. Use deception as well. It is not foreign to your profession. Stebbins blinked. What will it do? Wolfe looked at him as if explaining arithmetic to a chair. It will disturb the guilty. They believe the ledger page has been controlled. They removed a sticky note, staged an entry, arranged a camera gap, and attempted to force a sign. Off if they believe an uncontaminated copy exists outside their reach. They will attempt to retrieve it or destroy it, or they will betray themselves by panic, I said. And whoever panics hardest is the one who needs that sealed copy gone. Wolfe nodded. Precisely. Numbers do not drift without help, Mr. Goodwin, and fear does not drift without cause. Cramer muttered, something uncomplimentary about private detectives and their games. Then he sighed, because he was tired and because the structure was tightening around his suspects. All right, he said. I'll make the announcement. How do you want it delivered? Wolfe's eyes gleamed faintly. In the hearing of Mr. Denton and Mr. Klein, preferably within the building where they have already committed their errors. The setting will remind them of the last midnight. Cramer looked at me. You're coming, I smiled. Wouldn't miss it. Wolfe settled deeper into his chair, satisfied, as if the trap were already sprung. Then go and watch their faces. A man can keep his hands steady. He can keep his words neat, but he cannot always keep his fear from showing when he believes the paper has escaped him. Chapter 6. The New Year exposes the panic. If you want to see panic in its natural habitat, do not look for it in the street. New York hides emotion behind hurry. Look for it in offices, where men believe paper can protect them. Take away their faith in paper, and they behave like children who have been told the door is not locked. Cramer delivered Wolfe's announcement at Barton Freight just before noon, in the accounting suite, loud enough to be heard by anyone who cared, and by several who wished they did not. He did it with the stiff formality of a man swallowing something sour. He stood in the corridor with Stebbins, 2 uniformed men, and the air of a policeman who wants witnesses. I'm telling you now, he said, voice carrying, that Liam Crow left a sealed copy of the year, end ledger with the district attorney. If anyone thinks they can clean this up by adjusting records now, they're too late. People froze. A woman at a desk stopped typing mid-stroke. A man holding a folder lowered it, as if it had suddenly become heavy. Denise Vale's eyes narrowed, sharp as a blade, and she looked down the corridor toward the conference rooms. Kyle Denton came out of his office so fast, his chair probably spun behind him. Mason Klein stepped into view a moment later, slower but pale, his careful composure suddenly too thin. Kyle demanded, "What is this? A sealed copy? Who told you that?" Cramer stared at him. "The man's dead. The copy was sealed before he died." "We have it." Mason's voice was controlled, but his fingers moved at his side. Small, quick motions like a man testing the air for heat. "Inspector, if that is true, we should be allowed to review it privately. It contains proprietary financial information." Cramer snorted. "You'll get review time in a courtroom." Kyle stepped closer. His eyes were bright with anger, and something underneath it that was not anger. "This is insane. We need an emergency meeting right now." Denise Vale's voice cut in. "Kyle, you don't call emergency meetings unless you're trying to control the story." Kyle turned on her. "Denise, stay out of this." She did not blink. The announcement did exactly what Wolfe said it would do. It cracked the shield. It did not produce a confession. It produced motion. Guilty men move. Innocent men ask questions and wait. Kyle moved first. He turned abruptly and walked away, brisk, heading toward the freight storage section. I followed him, because I am good at being unnoticed when people are busy noticing their own fear. Also, Kyle had the stride of a man on a mission, and missions are rarely innocent. He went through a side door that led to a corridor lined with supply closets and storage rooms. He did not look back. He did not need to. He believed he had a right to hurry. At the end of the corridor was a storage room marked supplies. Kyle swiped his keycard and entered. I waited a few seconds, then approached quietly. The door did not latch fully. Inside, I heard the scrape of cardboard and the rustle of papers, Kyle's voice low, swearing. I pushed the door open just enough to see. Kyle was at a metal bin, the sort used for discarded packing straps. In his hands was a box of documents stamped in thick black letters, Q4 close. He had pulled a stack of pages and was feeding them into the bin, where a small flame licked and spread. The air smelled of smoke and scorched toner. He was not burning everything. He was selecting pages, plucking them with a practiced eye, tossing only those with certain headings. I could see one heading as it curled, North Dock Logistics. Kyle's face was set, his jaw clenched, his movements efficient. This was not a man improvising. This was a man performing a ritual of destruction. I stepped back and moved fast. Cramer was still in the accounting corridor, dealing with Mason Klein, who was now attempting to look offended rather than frightened. I went to Cramer and spoke quietly. Kyle is in a storage room burning documents. Box marked Q4 close. He's selecting North Dock references. Cramer did not waste time. He barked to Stebbins, "Move." We went down the corridor with 2 uniforms. Cramer's boots were loud on the tile. Kyle would hear, but it would be too late. When we reached the storage room, the smoke was already drifting under the door. Cramer shoved it open. Kyle froze with a page in his hand. The page was half charred at the corner. The bin was glowing with red and black, and in the heap were papers curling into ash. Cramer said, "Step away." Kyle's mouth opened. "This is company waste." Cramer's voice was hard. "It's evidence." Kyle's eyes flashed. "I'm operations. I don't even do accounting." Cramer nodded at a uniform. "Put him against the wall." Kyle stiffened, but he complied, eyes darting, calculating. He still looked confident, as if his job title could stop the law. Stebbins grabbed a fire extinguisher from the hall and hit the bin with white foam. The fire died with a hiss, leaving a wet, stinking mess of half-burned paper. Cramer pointed. "Bag it, all of it." A uniform began scooping the fragments with gloved hands into evidence bags. Among the half-burned edges I saw what mattered, initials on approval lines stamped or written, some crisp, some blurred. Cag D. Stebbins held up a fragment with 2 letters, still intact. "Inspector." Cramer's eyes narrowed. "Cade, that's you, Kyle." Kyle's face reddened. "That's not my initials." "It's your name," I said, "Kyle Denton. And you just burned North Dock references after hearing about a sealed ledger copy." Kyle's jaw clenched. "Those were duplicates, old drafts." Cramer's stare did not soften. "Old drafts don't burn this fast." Kyle swallowed, and his confidence flickered for the first time, but he recovered quickly, lifting his chin. "This is harassment. You can't arrest me for cleaning up clutter." Cramer did not arrest him then. He should have, but he did not, because Cramer likes his charges to stand up straight. He kept Kyle pinned by the weight of evidence and the presence of uniforms, but he did not slap cuffs on him. Not yet. While we were in the storage corridor, another commotion started back near it. A young man in a headset ran toward us, face pale, holding a printout. Denise Vale followed him, eyes sharp. "Inspector," the it man blurted. "We flagged an unauthorized remote login attempt to the accounting system. Someone tried to access audit logs from outside. It came through Mason Klein's credentials." Mason Klein, hearing his name, stepped forward as if he could outrun his own guilt. "That is absurd. I have access. I can check from home." The it man shook his head hard. Not to audit trail deletion. That's restricted. And the attempt was 10 minutes ago, from an external address. Cramer's face hardened. He turned on Mason. You're tampering. Mason's voice rose. I was trying to protect proprietary records. This is an internal matter, Cramer said. It's obstruction. Put your hands behind your back. Mason's composure cracked. His eyes darted. His mouth opened to argue. But the uniform had already stepped in. When the cuffs clicked, Mason's shoulders sagged, and for a moment he looked like a man who had been holding up a wall by will alone. Kyle watched Mason being cuffed with a strange expression. Almost relief, almost contempt. Kyle said loudly, See, that's finance. That's Mason. I'm operations. I move freight. Wolfe's comment echoed in my head even before I returned to the brownstone. Fraud is a creature of habit. It returns to its burrow when threatened. Mason had gone to his burrow in the system, trying to erase trails. Kyle had gone to his burrow in paper, burning what connected him to North Dock. They behaved like men in the same species, but different habitats. That afternoon, back at West 35th Street, Wolfe heard the report in his office with the air of a man listening to a well-composed piece of music. The house was quiet, warm, civilized. Outside, the city was still wet and grey, but inside Wolfe's world held steady, orchids upstairs, Theodore in the kitchen, a good chair under Wolfe, and facts arranged on paper before him. I told him everything: Kyle's emergency meeting demand, Mason's request for private review, the storage room fire, the Q4 close box, the recovered fragments with KD initials, Mason's remote login attempt and the IT flag, Cramer's arrest. Wolfe nodded once when I finished. Predictable. That's one word, I said. Another is desperate. Wolfe's eyes remained calm. Desperation is merely habit under pressure. Fraud relies on repetition. When threatened, it repeats its defenses. Burning paper, deleting logs. Both are childish, and therefore common. I said, Mason is in cuffs. Kyle is still walking around like a man with a badge of his own. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Mr. Klein could enter numbers. Mr. Denton could pressure people. One wrote. One enforced. I frowned. So you think Mason didn't swing the weapon? I am not satisfied, Wolfe said. Mr. Klein is capable of fraud. He is capable of tampering. But the murder requires a different quality. A man who can strike once, silently, without struggle, and leave. Also, a man who could stand over Mr. Crow and force a sign off. I said, Kyle. Wolfe's eyes did not blink. Likely yet, likelihood is not proof. We require the exact moment Mr. Crow ceased being a bookkeeper and became a target. I leaned back, feeling the case tighten around my throat, the way it always does in the middle. How? Wolfe's voice was firm. Find the moment he discovered the fraud would be sealed. Find when he wrote the warning and when it was removed. Find what he said in his call to Mr. Denton at 11:41. Find who else he contacted, what he intended. The target is not created by money alone. It is created by the threat of exposure. I said, You want the trigger? Wolfe nodded. Yes. The trigger for murder is not greed. It is fear of consequence. Locate the instant fear became unbearable. He looked at me, and his eyes were sharp now, the way they get when he assigns work that matters. Go, he said, and return with that moment. Chapter 7. Wolfe reopens January 1st. By late afternoon, the city had turned the color of used dishwater, which is what New York does when it cannot decide whether to snow or merely punish you with damp air. The taxis hissed past the curb on West 35th Street, and the brownstone sat there like it always does, calm and unimpressed, as if it had been built specifically to remind the rest of the block what dignity looks like. Inside, dignity had a schedule. Fritz had the front hall neat enough to shame a museum. Theodore was in the kitchen producing civilized smells that had no business existing in a case involving fraud, intimidation, and a man killed for insisting on receipts. And Wolfe, after giving his orchids their due upstairs, had returned to the office in time to receive his guests as if he were conducting a polite inquest for the benefit of his own intellect. I was at my desk with a stack of notes, copies, and photographs, arranged like a small paper city. Wolfe had insisted on the arrangement. He likes to see the pieces, not because he needs to touch them, but because he enjoys the knowledge that everything is within reach, even if he does not reach. "Mr. Goodwin," he had said an hour earlier, "our visitors will arrive with prepared lies. They must find those lies uncomfortable." "That is your specialty," I told him. "Indeed," he had replied, and that was as close as Wolfe comes to modesty. The first to arrive was Inspector Cramer, of course. He came in with his coat still damp at the shoulders, and his face set in that familiar mixture of irritation and grim hope. Sergeant Stebbins followed, carrying a folder as if it contained not paper, but a small explosive device. Cramer looked around the office as if it were taunting him. "You got them coming." "Yes," Wolfe said. "Sit, Inspector." Cramer did not sit. He never sits on command when Wolfe gives it, because Cramer believes his spine is a matter of principle. Wolfe did not argue. Wolfe enjoys letting Cramer stand until his feet begin to regret his opinions. Next came Martin Barton, the owner of Barton Freight Services, escorted by the look of a man who has been awake for 2 days and regrets having invented the word harmless. Denise Vale came with him, steady-eyed, coat removed, posture straight. She looked like the only adult in a room full of men trying to bargain with consequences. Then it arrived. The young man was named Alec Ramsey, and he wore a tie that looked like it had been tied in a hurry and then apologized for. He carried a thin binder and kept glancing at Cramer as if the badge might bite. Mason Klein came in last, and that was not by choice. He came with a uniformed officer who remained at the doorway, quiet but unmistakable. Mason's cuffs had been removed for the occasion, but the memory of them was still in his shoulders. He had attempted to restore his neatness. His tie was straight, his face was pale, his eyes were sharp, and they kept flicking to Wolfe's desk, as if the papers there might suddenly form a weapon. Kyle Denton arrived on his own, 5 minutes after Mason, and he arrived with the confidence of a man who believes he is still the one doing the pressuring. He had replaced his rumpled look with a pressed shirt and a smile that did not reach his eyes. He nodded to Barton. "Mr. Barton." Barton looked as if he wanted to duck under the rug. Kyle looked at Wolfe with forced ease. "Mr. Wolfe, I suppose you enjoy theatrics." Wolfe's voice was mild. "I enjoy clarity. Theatrics are merely what occurs when liars are forced into daylight." Kyle's smile tightened. "I am not a liar." "I have not yet labeled you," Wolfe said. "Do not hurry me." That is a Wolfe line, and it landed the way it always does. The room went quieter. I did the introductions as needed, because Wolfe prefers to ignore social grease. Fritz offered coffee, most accepted. Kyle declined, which I noted. Men who refuse coffee in Wolfe's office are either too tense to swallow or too determined to appear independent. Both conditions are interesting. Wolfe waited until everyone had a seat except Cramer, then began. "On January 1st, Wolfe said, a man named Liam Crow ceased being a bookkeeper and became an obstacle. That obstacle was removed. We will now reopen January 1st. Kyle shifted in his chair. Mason's fingers tightened on his cup. Barton stared at the floor. Denise Vale watched Wolfe with the attention of someone who has already decided that truth is preferable to comfort. Wolfe picked up a sheet of paper from his desk, glanced at it once, and set it down again. The paper was not for him. It was for the others, to make the facts visible. The corridor camera outside the accounting area restarted at 11:17 p.m., Wolfe said. "Mr. Ramsey, you will confirm." Alec Ramsey cleared his throat. "Yes, sir, the log shows a restart at 11:17 p.m. It was not a normal reboot. It appears the power was interrupted at the junction box." Kyle spoke quickly. "Cameras fail." Wolfe looked at him without expression. "They do. They also fail with assistance. A 12-minute gap is generous. The keycard entries for Mr. Denton and Mr. Klein are at 11:20 p. Martin jerked his head up. "Kyle, you told me you were home." Kyle's face reddened. "I came in briefly." Wolfe continued, unhurried. "Mr. Klein also entered at 11:20. Both of you claimed you were home by 10. That was false. Mason's voice was controlled. I said I was home by 10 because I was. I returned later. Wolfe nodded slightly. Correct, you returned. We will discuss why. He lifted another sheet. At 11:41 p.m., Liam Crow placed a call to Kyle Denton. That call is recorded on Mr. Crow's phone log, recovered from a trash bin. Kyle's eyes flashed. That proves nothing. It proves contact, Wolfe replied. And timing, Mr. Denton. What did Mr. Crow say in that call? Kyle leaned back, attempting casualness. He said he had concerns. He always had concerns. He was difficult. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Concerns about what? Kyle's jaw clenched. About invoices. About North Dock. He liked being strict. Wolfe turned his head slightly toward Barton. Mr. Barton, did you know Mr. Crow placed North Dock on hold? Barton swallowed. Denise told me after. I didn't know at the time, Denise Vale said, quietly. Liam froze them in December, split invoices. No signatures. He wrote a note. North Dock verify proof do not close. It was attached to the reconciliation copy. That note disappeared. Kyle's eyes snapped to her. That's not evidence. Wolfe's voice remained calm. The adhesive stain remains. Absence can be evidence when it is deliberate. He shifted in his chair, and the movement made the room feel as if a judge had changed posture. Now, Wolfe said. The physical ledger was stamped closed with a genuine stamp. The stamp ink is slightly smudged, consistent with a gloved hand applying it. Mr. Crow customarily stamped barehanded. Therefore someone else stamped it, or he was coerced to stamp it while someone else handled the stamp. Barton's face went grey. Somebody stamped my ledger with gloves. Wolfe looked mildly offended on Barton's behalf, which was almost comical. Yes, because whoever did it anticipated scrutiny or anticipated fingerprints. Cramer spoke then, his voice flat and useful. We also have the bank trail. Wolfe nodded. Present it. Cramer opened Stebbins' folder and removed copies. He placed them on Wolfe's desk, and I slid them so the others could see. The paper made a faint rasp on the wood that sounded. In that moment, like a verdict being sharpened, Cramer said, Payment from Barton Freight to North Dock. Then from North Dock to Dockside Mail and Parcel, a mailbox business. Then to a personal account belonging to Raymond Klein, cousin of Mason Klein. Barton stared at the paper as if it were an insult written in ink. Mason. Mason's voice rose. Tight. It is not what it appears. North Dock uses consolidation. Wolfe's eyes shifted to Mason. You have used that word. You also used reimbursement and rebate. Liars change language the way they change entries, quickly and quietly. The truth does not require synonym. Mason's face tightened. I am not a liar. Wolfe's voice stayed even. You are at least a fraud. We will decide later whether you are also a murderer. Mason's composure cracked for an instant. His eyes darted to Kyle, then away. Kyle sat very still. That was new. Kyle's confidence usually moved him. Stillness meant calculation, Wolfe said. We have established motive for fraud. We now establish mechanism and timing. The late entry on the paper ledger is dated January 1st, 11:58 p.m., 2 minutes before midnight. That time is psychological camouflage. It is designed to appear barely timely, a last minute correction in the noble struggle to close the year. It is not noble, it is calculated. He looked at Ramsey. Mr. Ramsey, the digital system shows the entry posted at 12:06 a.m., January 2nd, after the close. Correct. Ramsey nodded, eager to be correct. Yes, sir. It posted at 12:06 a.m. with an override and under Liam Crow's user ID, Kyle said, quickly. Under Crow's ID, that means Crow did it. Wolfe's eyes turned on him. Or someone used his credentials, or someone forced him to provide them. Mr. Denton, you are fond of convenience. Kyle opened his mouth, then closed it. Wolfe continued. Mr. Klein had the access to enter transactions after hours. Mr. Denton had the authority to approve vendor fees in emergencies and the temperament to pressure a man who refuses. It is my conclusion that the two of you were present in the office suite, Near midnight, arguing in whispers. Denise Vale spoke. Clear. The cleaner reported 2 men, one tall, one shorter, and nervous. Kyle is tall. Mason is shorter. Kyle's head snapped toward her. That cleaner doesn't know what he saw. Wolfe's tone was mild. He saw enough. You were there. Kyle laughed once sharp. Even if I was, it proves nothing. It proves opportunity, Wolfe replied, and it proves stress. He lifted a small evidence bag from the corner of his desk. I had placed it there earlier. Inside was a tiny piece of plastic, a chipped fragment. Wolfe held it up between thick fingers. Mr. Goodwin explained. I did. The pen used for the handwritten ledger entry was not crow's thin ink pen. It matched a thick, barreled dispatch pen. Dispatch had one pen with a chipped cap. This chip fragment was found near the ledger. The cap on the dispatch pen has a matching missing piece. Kyle's face tightened. Dispatch pens are everywhere. Not in accounting, I said. Crow never went to dispatch. He treated the loading bay like a disease. But you, Kyle, borrowed dispatch pens. Eddie Sperling confirmed it. Kyle's eyes flashed with anger. Eddie is a fool. He is, I agreed, but his pen rack is not. Wolfe's gaze fixed on Kyle. The handwritten entry is tied to a dispatch pen you use daily. This ties you to the physical act of writing in that ledger. Kyle leaned forward, voice hard. You're guessing. Wolfe shook his head once, slow. I am concluding. There is a difference. Barton's hands trembled on his knees. He looked at Kyle and Mason as if seeing them for the first time. You told me it was harmless, he said to Kyle. You told me it was an adjustment. Kyle spread his hands. Martin, it was to protect the company. Denise's eyes narrowed. Protect it from what? From honesty. Kyle turned on her. From contracts. From penalties. From your precious rules when the world doesn't care about them. Wolfe's voice cut through. The world may not care about rules. Auditors do, prosecutors do, and Liam Crow did. He leaned forward slightly. At 11:41, Mr. Crow called you, Mr. Denton. He had discovered that the North Dock fee lacked verified proof and should not be closed. He refused to close the ledger with an unverified charge. Kyle's jaw tightened. He was stubborn. He was correct, Wolfe said. You insisted the entry be made before midnight to protect the company, which is to say, to bury theft under the year, end boundary. When he refused, you employed leverage. Kyle's eyes flicked again, involuntarily, toward Mason. Wolfe followed that glance as if it were an arrow. Mr. Clean typed the digital entry after midnight. He then needed the paper ledger to suggest that the charge had been recorded before the close. Therefore, a handwritten entry was staged at 11:58. Mason's voice rose, brittle. I did not write in that ledger. Wolfe nodded, almost as if conceding. Perhaps not. The pen ties it to dispatch. Mr. Denton had access to dispatch pens and a habit of using them. Mr. Klein's role was the system. Yours was the paper. Kyle snapped. This is insane. You have no proof who wrote it. Wolfe's eyes were calm. We have evidence. We also have behavior. Mr. Denton, after hearing that a sealed copy of the ledger existed outside your control, you demanded an emergency meeting, and then went to a storage room and burned documents bearing North Dock references. Only North Dock references. Kyle's face flushed. Those were duplicates. Duplicates do not require panic, Wolfe said. Barton made a low sound, half groan, half anger. You burned my records. Kyle turned to him, pleading and fierce. I was trying to protect you. Barton's eyes were wet now, but his voice was hard. You were stealing. Mason spoke, suddenly sharp, a man cornered, and trying to shove someone else into the wall first. Kyle pressured Crow. Kyle always pressured. Kyle would stand in the doorway until you agreed, like that was his job. Kyle's head snapped around. Shut up. Wolfe watched the exchange with mild interest. He enjoys it when liars begin to revise their alliances. Cramer said, Mason, you tried to delete audit trails remotely. It flagged it. That's tampering. Mason's voice trembled. I was trying to fix it. You were trying to erase it. Denise Vale said. Wolfe raised a hand, and the room quieted, because when Wolfe raises a hand it suggests he might also raise a conclusion. Mr. Barton, Wolfe said, you described the late entry as harmless. You now perceive it as theft disguised as compliance. Correct. Barton nodded, swallowing. Yes, I was told it was an adjustment. I believed Kyle. I did not know the money went anywhere else. Wolfe nodded once. Ignorance is not exoneration, but it is a useful distinction. Barton looked crushed. Liam tried to tell me he tried. Denise Vale's voice softened slightly. Liam did not trust Martin to stand up to Kyle. Kyle's face hardened. This is all speculation. Wolfe's gaze settled fully on Kyle now, heavy and precise. It is not speculation that you were present near midnight, that you had authority to approve emergency fees, that you had access to the physical ledger, that you used dispatch pens, and that you destroyed North Dock. Related records when threatened. It is not speculation that Liam Crowe called you at 11:41, shortly before he was struck once from behind with no struggle, indicating he trusted his visitor or was cornered by authority. Kyle leaned back, breathing hard. You still don't have a witness to the strike. No, Wolfe said. Not yet. The words not yet hung in the room like a hook. Wolfe's voice remained steady. The late entry was a signature of intent, fraud timed to the year, and boundary. It was not a mistake. It was a plan, and plans require managers. He turned slightly toward Kyle, as if addressing him from a higher bench. A man who loves deadlines, Wolfe said, loves leverage. You use the deadline to corner Liam. Kyle's smile returned for a moment, thin and dangerous. Corner him how? With talk. Wolfe's eyes did not blink. With the threat of ruin, with the claim that he would be blamed for a failure if he refused, with the pressure of your authority and your urgency. You did not need to shout. You only needed to make him feel alone at 11:41 on New Year's night. Kyle's jaw tightened. He called me. That means he came to me. Wolfe nodded. Yes, he called because he believed you could be reasoned with, or because you summoned him. The call is the hinge. Mr. Goodwin, your assignment remains. I sat up. I had been waiting for Wolfe to bring it back to me, because Wolfe never lets his assistant forget. He is the one who walks into corridors and asks questions that people resent. Wolfe said, we must find the exact moment Mr. Crowe became a target, not a general motive. The moment. Kyle looked at me then, his eyes sharp, and I felt a small coldness in my spine. It is one thing to suspect a man. It is another to have him look at you as if you are an obstacle too. Wolfe leaned back, ending the immediate pressure without releasing it. We will adjourn, Wolfe said. For now. Inspector, you will retain Mr. Clean and ensure Mr. Denton does not leave the city. Mr. Barton, you will remain available. Miss Vale, you will also remain available. Mr. Ramsey, you will provide full system logs and remote access records. Mr. Denton, you will do nothing foolish. Kyle's eyes narrowed. Or what? Wolfe's voice was mild. Or you will confirm what you have been trying to deny. Cramer finally sat, not because Wolfe told him to this time, but because the chair had begun to look like mercy. Wolfe's eyes shifted to the papers on his desk as if they were a menu he had already chosen from. Close is a matter of time. In this case, time is the weapon. We have reopened January 1st. We will now close the murderer. When the guests were escorted out, the brownstone regained its quiet. But it was not restful quiet. It was the quiet of a room after a quarrel. When the furniture remembers the words, Theodore appeared with a tray because Theodore believes food should arrive regardless of crime. Wolfe accepted his coffee. I accepted mine. Fritz moved like a shadow in the hall. Wolfe looked at me over his cup. Mr. Goodwin, you understand your task. Yes, I said. Find the instant Liam stopped being a bookkeeper and became a target. Wolfe nodded. The call at 11:41 is central. It is the point at which Mr. Crow chose to act, determine why, determine what he had discovered in that moment that made delay intolerable. I stood, already feeling the city's damp cold waiting for me. All right, I'll go dig up the last honest minute of Liam Crow's life. Wolfe's eyes were steady. Do so, and Mr. Goodwin. Yes, sir. The murderer relied on a boundary midnight. Boundaries invite mistakes when men hurry. Find the mistake. That was Wolfe, always confident that haste leaves fingerprints even when gloves are worn. I picked up my coat, my notebook, and my skepticism, and went out into New York's grey evening, because in this partnership the armchair stays home, and the legs go looking for the truth that will soon have to stand in Wolfe's office and endure being named. Chapter 8. Fraud. Then murder. It is an odd feeling to watch a case finish itself, as if the last knot in a rope has decided to come loose, without being begged. You spend days chasing paper, listening to men explain money as if it were weather, and then at the end you find out it was never really about money at all. It was about the moment the money stopped being abstract and became personal. The night after Wolfe's gathering in the office, I went back to Barton Freight one more time, because Wolfe had told me to find the mistake Haste made. He was right about haste. Haste makes liars step on their own lies. The mistake turned out to be simple. Kyle Denton had pressured many people in that company, but he had pressured Liam Crow too close to midnight. Crow had left behind something Kyle did not think about, a habit of making records in more than one place. Denise Vale met me near the dispatch desk after hours. She was still at work, which was not surprising. Denise seemed to be fueled by a blend of coffee and resentment. You said Liam made reminders, I told her. Where else did he keep them? Denise's eyes narrowed. He kept a personal log, not in the accounting system. A notebook. He called it his sanity book. Where? I asked. In his drawer, she said. The police already searched. They searched for evidence, I said. I'm searching for habits. Denise led me to Liam Crow's old desk. The police had taken most of what mattered, but there were still indentations in the wood where years of elbows had pressed. The desk looked lonely, which is what desks do when the man behind them is gone. Denise opened the lower drawer. It was empty except for a small cardboard divider that had been glued in place. The glue had loosened slightly at one corner. I pried it up carefully and slid my fingers beneath. A thin notebook came out. Black cover, cheap, the sort you buy without thinking. Inside, Liam Crow's handwriting was neat and tight, angry in its discipline. Denise exhaled. He hid it. He hid it. I agreed. From men like Kyle. The last pages were dated December 30, 1st and January 1st. Crow had made notes about North Dock, split invoices, missing signatures, and then a line that froze me for a moment. 11:36 p.m. Kyle demands reroute fee posted. No proof. I refuse. He says it will be on me if company takes hit. I will not. We'll call him. Then 11:41 p.m. called Kyle. He says come to back office. Says Mason will be there to solve it. Then one more if they try to force sign. Off, I will report to Barton and to audit. Do not close. That was the moment Wolfe wanted. The instant Crow became a target. He wrote it down because he did not trust the heir to remember. I took the notebook to Cramer and watched his face change as he read. Cramer's jaw tightened and his eyes hardened. That's enough, he said. That's motive and timeline. It's also invitation, I said. Come to back office, Mason will be there. That matches the cleaner's report. Cramer nodded once. We'll bring them in again. He brought them to Wolfe's office the next day, because by then it had become the natural place for truth to be announced. The brownstone was not a police station, but it functioned like a court when Wolfe wanted it to. Wolfe held the notebook with 2 fingers, as if it might contaminate his sense of order. He read the relevant lines once, then looked up at Kyle Denton. Kyle arrived with his usual attempt at confidence. It failed faster today. His eyes were bloodshot. His jaw was tight. He looked like a man who had slept poorly because his own thoughts had been interrogating him. Mason Klein arrived under guard, pale and brittle. He had moved past indignation into calculation. He was now the kind of man who tries to determine how much can be saved. Martin Barton arrived too, face drawn, eyes tired. Denise Vale sat to one side, steady, and Cramer stood at the end of the room like a wall. Wolfe began without ceremony. Mr. Denton, on January 1st at 11:30, 6 p.m. You demanded that Mr. Crow post a reroute fee for North Dock without proof of delivery. He refused. At 11:41 he called you. You told him to come to the back office and said Mr. Klein would be there. That is recorded in Mr. Crow's private notebook. Kyle's face flushed. That notebook could be forged. Wolfe's eyes were cold. By whom, Mr. Crow, after his death? Do not insult us with nonsense. Kyle's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at Barton, perhaps hoping for rescue. Barton did not look back. Wolfe continued, voice steady. Mr. Crow threatened to report the unverified reroute fee and the split invoices. He intended to notify Mr. Barton and the auditors. You perceived that threat as intolerable because the fraud had been ongoing and would soon be sealed by year-end closure. Kyle's hands clenched. I was protecting the company. Wolfe nodded. That is what thieves say when they steal inside familiar walls. Mason's voice rose sharp. This is all about fraud, not murder. I did not kill anyone. Wolfe looked at him. You did not strike him. You did assist. Mason's face tightened. Number, Wolfe, lifted a hand slightly. Be silent, Mr. Klein. Your time to speak will come, and you will regret it. Kyle's eyes flicked toward Mason. That glance was the mistake. It was the glance of a man checking whether his partner will hold. Wolfe saw it and smiled faintly, which is always disturbing because Wolfe smiles are rare and usually lethal. Mr. Denton, Wolfe said, you brought Mr. Klein in to fix the books. He had access. You had pressure. You believed that if you could force Mr. Crow to sign off under time pressure, the ledger would close and the fraud would be disguised as compliance. Kyle's voice grew louder. He could have just done it. He didn't have to make a crusade. Wolfe's tone sharpened. He did have to, if he was honest. Kyle's face twisted. His hands moved, and for a moment his control slipped. He looked like a man back in that small room with the clock approaching midnight. It was always him, Kyle burst out. Always the rules, always the receipts. He didn't care what it cost. He didn't care about penalties, contracts, nothing. He cared about being right. Barton's voice came low, bitter. And you cared about money. Kyle turned on him. I cared about keeping your company alive, Denise Vale said, quiet and firm. You cared about keeping your scheme alive. Kyle's eyes flashed. You don't know what pressure is, Wolfe's voice cut through. Pressure does not excuse murder. Tell us what occurred in the back office. Kyle's chest rose and fell. For a moment, he looked as if he might hold, then the weight of the notebook, the bank trail, the burned documents, the chipped pen, and Wolfe's calm certainty pressed him into a corner where there was only one thing left. He laughed once. Harsh. Fine. His eyes went to the rug, then to Wolfe's desk, then to his own hands. I called Mason, Kyle said. I told him we needed the entry. We needed it done right. We couldn't have it floating into January. We needed it in December. We needed the ledger closed clean. Wolfe said, continue. Kyle swallowed. Liam called me. He said he was going to report it. He said he had notes. He said he'd tell Martin. He'd tell Audit. He thought he could walk into Monday like a hero. Barton made a small sound, half pain. Kyle's voice tightened. I told him to come to the back office. I said Mason would explain. Liam came because he thought he could reason, or because he was afraid I'd blame him. He cared about blame. He cared about records. Wolfe's eyes stayed on Kyle. And you attempted to force a sign-off. Kyle nodded, face rigid. We put the ledger in front of him. Mason had the system ready, we said. Sign off, stamp it, and we can fix the paperwork later. Liam refused. He said no proof, no payment. He said, "The hold stays." He said, "Do not close." Like that was holy. Mason spoke, bitter. He was impossible. Wolfe's eyes flicked to Mason like a blade. Mason shut up. Kyle's voice rose, anger returning with the memory. He wouldn't budge. The clock was moving. Midnight was coming. The close mattered. I told him, "If you don't do it, it's on you," he said. "Put it on me, I'll still report." Wolfe said softly, "Then you struck him." Kyle's shoulders sagged. He stood up. He started toward the door. He was going to walk out and call someone. I grabbed the paperweight. I didn't think. I hit him once. The room went silent. The kind of silence that feels like a physical thing. Kyle's voice dropped. He fell. He didn't even make noise. Just down. Barton's eyes closed. Denise Vale stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, as if she had decided not to give Kyle the satisfaction of seeing her react. Wolfe's voice was calm. "One blow, no struggle. That matches the medical finding." Kyle nodded, almost relieved now that the words were out. "I didn't mean to kill him. I meant to stop him," Wolfe said. "Stopping a man with a blunt instrument is rarely temporary." Kyle's eyes flicked toward Mason. Then Mason panicked. He said, "We had to stage it." He said we had to make it look like Liam did the entry, like it was normal. He said the new year would bury it. Mason's face went white. Kyle ignored him. "Mason locked the door from the inside after we left. Then we used the key. We wiped. We wore gloves. He stamped the ledger because Liam was dead and couldn't. He wrote the 11:58 entry with my dispatch pen because his pen was too thin, and he said thick ink looked official. He removed Liam's warning note because it was trouble. Then he went home and tried to erase the audit trail later when you announced the sealed copy." Mason's voice cracked. "You did it. You hit him." Wolfe nodded. "Yes, but you assisted. You staged. You attempted to erase. Fraud, obstruction, accessory after the fact, and possibly conspiracy." Cramer stepped forward, and the room shifted from Wolfe's controlled atmosphere into the blunt reality of police work. "Kyle Denton," Cramer said, "you're under arrest for murder." Kyle did not resist. He looked almost dazed, as if confession had emptied him. Mason's voice rose. "This is unfair. I didn't kill him." Cramer's gaze was hard. "You helped cover it. You moved the money. You tried to delete logs. You're facing expanded charges." Mason's shoulders slumped. He looked like a man whose neatness has finally failed him. Barton stood slowly, as if his legs were unfamiliar. His voice was hoarse. "You killed him for an invoice." Kyle's eyes flickered, and for a moment there was something like shame. It vanished quickly. Shame requires a conscience that has not been worn down by deadlines. Wolfe watched them with a faint look of distaste, as if human greed were an odor in the room. When Cramer and his men took Kyle and Mason out, the brownstone breathed again. The office seemed larger, quieter. The lamps glowed steadily. Theodore's aromas drifted faintly indifferent. Barton remained standing, staring at Wolfe, as if Wolfe had just shown him the inside of his own company's stomach. Wolfe said, "Mr. Barton, your word harmless was inaccurate." Barton swallowed. "I was blind." "You were willfully inattentive," Wolfe corrected. "That is common. Comfort dulls vigilance." Denise Vale spoke quietly. "Liam tried to hold the line." Wolfe nodded. "He did, and he paid." Barton's voice was raw. "What do I do now?" Wolfe's tone was cool. "Repair. What can be repaired? Cooperate with the authorities. Remove men like Mr. Denton from positions of leverage, and remember that rules are not religion. They are safeguards." Barton nodded, eyes wet. He left with Denise, moving slowly, as if the building on West 35th had shifted his understanding of what a company can become when fear and greed find a deadline. When the door closed behind them, Wolfe leaned back in his chair, exhaled once, and looked at me. His eyes were tired but satisfied, which is the closest he comes to warmth after a case. "The new year," Wolfe said, "does not cleanse accounts, It only makes the last lie easier to see. I nodded. Because the boundary makes the lie bright. Precisely, Wolfe replied. They believed January would bury them under fresh work and convenient adjustments. Instead, the boundary exposed them. A late entry under a closed ledger is conspicuous. It invites inspection. I looked around the office. Everything was in its place again, as if the room itself refused disorder. Wolfe's chair held him like a throne. My desk held my notes. Outside, New York's damp winter kept moving. I said, "Midnight isn't magic." Wolfe's brows lifted slightly. "It's just a minute hand," I went on. "Unless you're trying to hide a crime in it, then it becomes a trap." Wolfe's mouth tightened into the faintest hint of approval. And Mr. Denton discovered too late that leverage is a poor substitute for judgment. Theodore appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Wolfe, dinner is served." Wolfe rose with visible reluctance, because even victory does not make him love stairs. As we left the office, I glanced once at the desk where the ledger copies lay, and I thought about Liam Crowe, sitting alone on New Year's night, watching the clock as if it were an enemy. He had believed that if he held the line until midnight, the year would close clean and the rules would win. He was right about the rules. He was wrong about what desperate men will do when the minute hand threatens to expose them. And in New York, that is the difference between a bookkeeper and a corpse.